Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, your host, coming to you from the BNN Live Studios, Eggleston Square, Jamaica Plain, where tonight on the Boston Neighborhood Network, we bring you Election 2013. That's right, 2+ hours of live coverage from including all the results from today's preliminary election here in the city of Boston. Of course, the polls just closed a little more than a half hour ago. There's still people waiting in line in some places. A very tight race, perhaps the best field in, well, more than 20 years, the last time it was an open seat, and some people say 30 years. It has brought a wealth of candidates, most of them very well qualified to become the next mayor of the city of Boston. The polling showing it too close to call, and tonight we'll find out who the winners are, who the top two finishers are that go on to the final election in November. Also on the ballot today, 19 candidates running at large for 4 city council seats, 4 at-large city council seats. There's also some very interesting district council races with so many candidates jumping into the mayor's race. Tonight, we'll find out who moves on in those races as well. Some very special guests tonight, a terrific show. The man many people think could well be the next governor of the Commonwealth of Mass. He joins us. That is Steve Grossman, the state treasurer. Also, the man who is currently Suffolk County Sheriff, who hopes to continue to be Suffolk County Sheriff. Steve Tompkins joins us, as well as more than a dozen other analysts, including media personalities, public officials, neighborhood activists. All of that tonight you'll get. And coming up in just a few minutes, joining me as well, a special guest host, Seth McCoy. All of that and more tonight on Talking the Neighborhoods. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back. Talking the Neighborhoods. Tonight, election 2013, the race, the election we've all been waiting for, the preliminary election that will narrow the field in the mayor's race, the council races, and tonight we have 2+ hours of coverage starting in this segment with some very special guests. As I mentioned at the top of the show, man many people believe could be the next governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He's currently, of course, it's state treasurer, serving his first term, and he was nice enough to come by and join us tonight for this show. We're talking Steve Grossman. Steve, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And, of course, the man who stepped into the shoes of the Suffolk County Sheriff and will be running for election in his own right next year as well. Steve Tompkins. Thank you, Steve.
Joseph, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Nice to have you both here.
Okay.
He needed no training. He stepped in like he was a natural.
I know.
I learned from a master. Huh? Okay, come on.
Well, guys, there are a few candidates out there on pins and needles today, tonight, all day, in fact, thinking about waiting for the results. Of course, the polls are now closed. But Steve, you've been there and run before and then elected this last time around, and Steve, you'll get your baptism of fire coming up. I know you've been involved in some campaigns. What are all these candidates feeling out there tonight?
I hope they're feeling good about what they've done, because if you think and read and watch this race, 12 candidates for mayor, they really have done a terrific job at talking about the things that matter to the people of this city. They've talked about jobs, they've talked about education, they've talked about spreading prosperity more widely, they've talked about every manner of issue. It's been a positive campaign, it's been issues-oriented, it's shed more light than heat, as we like to say. So I think even those candidates who are disappointed when they put their head down on the pillow tonight, I hope they say, I did my best, I left no stone unturned, I reflected credit on myself, I represented my values and the values of the people of this city, and for that, I say thank you to all 12 of candidates.
And keep it in perspective, Steve. Of course, you can always hope that this trend will continue. But Boston's always been known as a city, in politics, some sharp elbows. Some people compared it to a blood sport. This has been unusually civil, don't you think?
I think it's been very civil, and although I agree with the treasurer, that's a good thing. I would have liked to see a little more dust kicked up, just because folks want to see what's going to happen. I think that's going to happen in the next phase. When you get down to the next two, that's where you're really going to see them go at it. But here's what resonates with me loud and clear, is that the city is really remarkably changing. You're going to have a new mayor, you're going to have mostly a new city council, you're going to have a new police commissioner, a new school superintendent, and you're going to have a new governor shortly. And so where do we go from here? And I think the 21st century is going to be awesome in the city of Boston.
Well, some people thought that perhaps this was the year. Of course, we've had now our first African-American governor. We've had our first African-American president. That maybe this was the year we had first African-American mayor. The polls, well, they're not clear. It's certainly, but there's a number of great candidates in the race, and I guess that says something in and of itself.
That could happen. It's way too close to call, as you said earlier. It's all margin of error, as we like to say in the political business. But think about just what happened in the recent past. Think about Linda Dorsina Forey getting elected to the state senate, representing South Boston, and she will be a terrific, terrific leader for all the people of her senate district. So I agree with Steve. This city is changing dramatically, and it needs to change dramatically in terms of spreading economic prosperity more widely. That is our biggest challenge right now, leveling the playing field and leaving no one behind. And that is the challenge that the next mayor will face, whoever she or he is.
Of course, polls are polls, and we all know it's just a snapshot, a place in time, so to speak, but showing an incredible amount of undecided voters in this in this race, and perhaps it's correct, maybe they're not. What does that say? That the fact that there were so many undecided so late in the preliminary season?
Well, and I think it speaks to the number of new and first-time candidates. You've got people from all over the spectrum that are now in the race, and the people don't really know them. You see, they know a Steve Grossman for all the work that he's done, and they know others. But say a Charles Clemens, a Michelle Wu in the citywide, and others, Jack Kelley, and so on and so forth. They don't know these folks, so they don't really have their arms. They don't have a barometer. They don't have their arms around them right now. So tonight is going to be very telling. But what happens after tonight, beginning tomorrow, is really, I think, what's going to turn the worm.
Well, of course, and we've got a few minutes. I want to very quickly talk about, dare we look ahead? I know you both are, to 2014. There's been so many elections. Well, of course, the drama of the presidential election, then we've had a number of special elections, at least here in the city, and now in the suburbs. There's now a congressional district primary. Some talk about voter fatigue out there. You guys are on the hustings. You're out there just about every day talking to people. Do you get that sense that people are kind of fatigued by this?
I hear about voter fatigue, but I think what is really important is you've got to excite the imagination of voters. If you come up with an idea or an approach to problem solving, common sense problem solving, that people say, now, he or she is speaking to me, to my kids, to my parents, to the education that I owe my children, that this city and this community owes all of our kids. So I think it's about exciting the imagination by being bold, by being innovative, by not holding back, by not being tentative. Get out there and be bold. Stand for something Let people know who you are, what you stand for, the kind of leadership you want to provide, and then if they don't buy it, at least you did your best. But don't hold back. Don't be timid. This is not a time for timidity. Boston and Massachusetts have always been laboratories of experimentation and innovation for 400 years. And any of these candidates who wants to be the next mayor or wants to be in the city council, you get 19 candidates running at large, they've got to lay it out there and be willing to wear it out there on their sleeve and be willing to put it all and leave it all in the field.
So consider this. When you talk about voter fatigue and you talk about the number of races, this is what I look at. This gives opportunity, particularly for folks that either have not been in the political mainstream or folks of color, to really get engaged. Not necessarily as the candidate, but all of that behind the scenes thing. You know what I mean? The campaign managers, the accountants, the field operatives. This gives them an opportunity to learn their craft and move up. And so, we may be looking at the future Doug Rubins down the road 10 years from now, 5-10 years from now, or the Mike Kenevis, because right now, at this time, with all of these races, this is giving folks a platform to learn their craft.
Any of these candidates kind of jump out at you? And I know you're not wading into endorsements or anything like that, that kind of struck you as striking a different chord or really striking the chord of voters in a different way?
It's interesting. I love wonderful, incredible personal stories. Jack Kelley has an extraordinary story.
Right. From Charlestown.
Exactly. And Jack Kelley coming back from addiction to being a person who's making something out of his life and wants to deliver for his community. Excuse me, you've got a restaurant owner from the North End who's running and bringing small business perspective. Michelle Wu, although many people don't know it, also a candidate for at-large city council, was a small business owner in Chicago and brings a wonderful perspective. So I agree with Steve, but I also think that what's really most important is what do we deliver? How do we deliver jobs, entrepreneurship, and economic development to the neighborhoods of Boston that have been left out and left behind? I think all the time. I'm a small business owner. I ran a business for 35 years. As state treasurer, we put together a small business banking partnership, and we poured money into local banks, community banks, regional banks that have been willing to lend money to small businesses in the neighborhoods of Boston and in our gateway communities. We need to create wealth and economic opportunity broadly shared all over the city. That, to me, is the principal goal.
I'm going to agree with Steve on the personal stories. Michelle Wu's story, I think, is fantastic. If you look at the mayor's race, I think John Barrow's story is fantastic. And if you look at what I would call an incumbent or a guy who's been around for quite some time, I look at Robbie Consalvo. Robbie has done some great things. I'm up in Hyde Park. Robbie is my city councilor. He's extraordinary, and I don't know that a lot of people have known that about Robbie. This race gave him the opportunity to introduce himself to the electorate.
Right, he's a district councilor.
I agree. I go to his event at the Elks over there every year, and I mean, but by the time the event starts, there are 500 people in the room. They love him because he loves them and because he delivers for them over and over again. Rob Consalvo is a guy who never lost his feel for the neighborhoods and the streets of his community. That, to me, is noteworthy.
Yeah.
Well, and guys, we've got a couple minutes. I've got to ask you about 2014 because as soon as this one's over, all of us pundits, political junkies, some would call us, will immediately focus on next year's race. Steve, you've already indicated that you're planning to run.
Or I'm running. I'm out there.
You're definitely running.
I want people to say he's everywhere. Those are the two words I want people to say about me. He's everywhere.
You know what? And they're saying it because he is everywhere.
I know. I see him all the time.
Before I came here tonight, I was in Norwell meeting with grassroots activists in Norwell. So it's.
But has the will the tenor of the campaign or the focus of the campaigns change? Of course, so much has been focused on jobs because of the recession, et cetera, et cetera. We seem to be digging our way out of this now. How do you think the campaign turns next year? What will you be focusing on?
Look,
primarily?
I'm running for governor because I think the people of this Commonwealth want proven leadership that will leave no one behind. So it's always been about leveling the playing field for me. My grandfather came to East Boston in 1900. We've been here for 113 years. We've had a business for 103 years. We've benefited from this city and this community, and giving back is something we all do. But fundamentally, I'm proud to be the only, at this moment, the only business person in this race, somebody who spent his life creating jobs, running a business, meeting a payroll, and I've taken that into the state treasurer's office, and I think I've demonstrated that you can use government as a force for leveling the playing field and encompassing people and providing economic opportunity. Entrepreneurship is what this city and this state has been all about. As I said, experimentation and innovation, and I want to continue that tradition, building on a foundation that Val Patrick created, but going to the next level.
Well, and little devil's advocate here, of course, some people saying after 8 years of Deval Patrick, perhaps the Republicans are positioned to make a comeback. You also potentially could face a primary in this race as well.
Well, I've got a primary. I've got a whole bunch of candidates, and Charlie Baker will be out there running on his own. But at the end of the day, it is all about looking people in the eye and demonstrating to them that you have the common sense solutions that are going to improve the quality of their lives. I mean, the neighborhoods of Boston and our gateway, our older industrial cities, have been left out, left behind. Unemployment levels are too high. We've got to spread it more widely. It can't be enough to just have it be in a certain few industries and a certain sections of the state. It's got to be spread widely. Don't leave people out. Don't leave people behind. There are too many people living in the neighborhoods of Boston that still have not benefited from this wealth creation. We're creating we have more diversity than ever before and more inequality than ever before. And the inequality that I see every day is something we need to deal with. That's the next mayor's going to deal with that, the city council's going to deal with that, a governor's going to deal with that, and a sheriff deals with that.
And what tack will you take? Of course, Steve, you cut your teeth working with Andrea Cabral, a former sheriff who you succeeded, but I know you also did a lot of work in Elizabeth Warren's campaign for the Senate here.
But I want to follow what the treasurer said about the equity and being equitable and being fair. And my perch clearly is criminal justice, public safety. And so we have to look at how we get people back home, how we get people out of jail. It costs $46,000 to incarcerate. I've got over 1,400 guys in my facility. What happens is that taxes the system, but that also taxes the household. The father needs to be at home. The mother needs to be at home, needs to be raising their kids. And so what we're looking at is how do we work within that community correction system with parole, probation, law enforcement to keep folks out of jail? And then how do we work with those that are transitioning out to stay out? And that goes back to employment. They need jobs, they need housing, and they need health care. And so I'm anxiously looking forward to working with you as the treasurer or the governor to make sure that we enrich people's lives.
And let me add one postscript to that. What sheriffs need as much as anything, and I know all the sheriffs in the Commonwealth, I know Steve real well, he's a dear, dear friend. What sheriffs need is a bigger investment in mental health services, behavioral health services, substance abuse services. We have cut those again and again and again. It's an unwise decision to have made. I understand budgets that had to be cut, but we need, as the economy comes back, to invest in mental health, behavioral health, and substance abuse. It will keep men and women out of those situations, and it'll get them back in a productive life, which is really what this is all about.
Of course, Steve, I've got to ask you, because there's 12 people running for mayor here, 10 of whom will not be going on, and some have suggested that they'll be looking for a place to land. Are you worried that you might inherit some competition next year's?
No, I'm a big fan of the democratic process. And so you have more people in the mix that are more voices that bring solutions. Now, I'm going to win, but it's not bad to have competition because it just sharpens what you do. So no, I don't fear that. Bring it on.
And of course, Steve, the Attorney General, Martha Coakley, just announced that she is intending to run as well. Does that change the way you approach your campaign for governor? And
No, I think it's important to basically be authentic, be who you are. I think it's important for somebody like me who spent 35 years running a business, growing a business successfully, building a business, who knows how to create jobs, and who demonstrated that as treasurer of the Commonwealth during these last almost 3 years, to be in the business of creating jobs, economic opportunity, broadly shared. She'll run her race, excuse me, I'll run mine, but at the end of the day, it's about being who you are, looking people in the eye, asking for their support.
Let the chips fall where they may.
Exactly.
Both of you, right, guys?
Exactly. So I'm excited about the race, and I'm excited about this guy being sheriff for another 6 years. 6-year term, right?
It's a 6-year term, but I have to run in 2014 and then 2016 before I get to the 6
gosh,
year. I do, right, to finish out Andrea's term.
Scott Brown effect there.
Yeah.
Multiple Well, one step at a time. Just very quickly, we do have some very early returns now, and we want to quickly bring you up to date. Of course, joining us live in studio here is State Treasurer Steve Grossman and Suffolk Sheriff Steve Tompkins. But very quickly now, with 6.9% of the precincts reporting, we want to give you a quick update. And there you can see it. These are the top 4 results for mayor at this point in time, and it's showing. And again, we're not certain where these numbers are coming from. It could dramatically skew the outcome, or at least the numbers at this point. But wherever they're coming from, Marty Walsh is doing very well. That's of course the state representative Martin Walsh, and not too far behind him, City Councilor at Large John Connolly. Dan Connolly, the Suffolk DA, is back a ways from there. And then Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, former state rep, former DND commissioner, and worked with the Patrick administration, Menino administration, is 4th. These, again, are very preliminary results. 6.9% of the precincts reporting. I don't know if we have the other numbers. We will be tabulating them and bringing them to you shortly. And here we have some District 8 numbers. And again, this is with 4.5% reporting. Wow. And so far, Josh Zakem, who was the famous namesake of his father, whom the bridge is named after, well-known activist, he has a large lead. Again, we're not sure where these numbers are coming from. Very preliminary. And of course, they are unofficial numbers. That's District 8.
Let me make one final comment, because I think we're probably near the end of the hour.
Yes, we are.
Just as I hope to build on a foundation that Deval Patrick has put in place, I think these 2 finalists, whoever they happen to be tonight, and the one who wins on November 5th, I think it is, right, has an unbelievable foundation that Tom Menino has created. What Tom Menino has done for this city in the past 20 years, what this city looks like today, the sense of empowerment and stakeholdership that so many citizens feel, even with some of the challenges we still have, is truly remarkable. And I would not want to let my time here on the set end without really expressing our appreciation, all of us, for that foundation. He has really built an amazing, to be built on, not to stay static, but to go beyond. And every political person needs to be gone beyond, but it's been quite a run.
And I would agree, love him or hate him, I don't think there's anybody that doesn't agree the city has made great progress in the last 20 years. Even those who are looking forward to a new brand of leadership. And guys, we appreciate you coming by tonight and joining us again.
Thank you for having us.
State Treasurer Steve Grossman, of course, running for governor next year. Next year is a very big year for, the Commonwealth, certainly, and we'll be watching to see your progress. I have to say you've made great progress to date. Looking forward to it. And, of course, Suffolk County Sheriff Steve Tompkins, who inherited that mantle from his mentor, his predecessor, Andrea Cabral, and running in his own right next year as well. Guys, appreciate it. You got to love this day if you love politics. If you love elections. It doesn't get much better than this.
No, it doesn't. And the fact of the matter is, for me, he's Suffolk County, and that's what his beat is. For me, it's 351 cities and towns, but I will be working very, very hard and look forward to coming back on the set as often as you'll have me to talk to the people of the city of Boston about our future and what a governor can do to really deliver for the people of the city.
Joe, next year,
and this guy is on the set here. Of course,
the treasurer's been on our show also, but next year you need to come out to the Democratic Convention. You need to bring your show on the road.
There you go.
Because that's going to be a lot of fun out at the Democratic Convention.
Where's the convention at? In Worcester.
Worcester.
Come on out.
We'd love to. We keep trying to take this show on the road. We cover a lot of ground in studio, but we're always looking for new opportunities. Guys, I want to thank you both so much for coming.
Thank you.
Steve Grossman,
Thanks
as
so much,
always.
Joe. Thank you.
Steve Tompkins, who hosts his own show here on BNN TV, and is a well-known face as well. We appreciate it. We're going to shift now. We're going to go over to my colleague, who's guest hosting tonight, a favorite of mine. Seth McCoy joins us with her own guests, and some more updates on the latest results from today's preliminary election. Seth, here's to you.
City Councilor and all-around guru of everything Boston politics. So you just sat down and you basically told me what you think the final is. So let's tell the viewers at home what you think it's.
With 70% of the vote totaled, Marty Walsh 1, John Conley 2, Dan Conley 3, Charlotte Golevich 4. Subject to change, but that appears the way it's going to end up.
So anything about that surprise you?
No, not really. I mean, it's the new Boston is the old Boston.
Right.
Both John Conley and Marty Walsh both had terrific get out the vote operations, the ground troops, the bodies that went and found the voters, got them to the polls, and drove them home. And that's really what this race was all about.
What about candidates like Felix Arroyo, Rob Consalvo? Some people had them maybe finishing a little higher. Maybe not in the top 2, but certainly coming in a little bit in maybe the top 4, top 5.
Well, there's a sense that, I mean, there is, the census is correct. The city is majority minority. So you would think that Felix, Latino candidacy, or John Barros or Charlotte would have done better. But, you know, it's still Boston. The vote still comes from essentially 5 to 6 precincts within the city, and that's where you focus, and that's where you get the vote, and that's where the vote historically has come from, and that's where it came from today.
And so we're looking at a mayoral election between Marty Walsh, John Conley, and what do you think now the steps are? I mean, clearly there are distinct differences between the two candidates. Marty is a big labor guy, John is a huge charter school guy. How do you think that will play out?
Well, for sure it's a contrast between the two. Education is important. I think as I understand it, Walsh is also in favor of raising the charter school cap.
Yep.
So it'd be interesting to see where the Boston Teachers Union, where they end up. Their candidates were Rob Consalvo and Felix.
Yep.
But it's, you know, Marty Walsh a labor person, but that's not necessarily, historically it's always been a good thing.
Right.
I'm not sure why now it's not a good thing to be a labor candidate. But
Well, I think people obviously tried to paint it that if Marty Walsh becomes mayor, when he's negotiating contracts, it will be difficult for him to step away from the table as a labor guy and make decisions based on what's best for the city.
I don't quite see it that way. I think he is a labor person, but you know, actually he'll face more pressure to do the right thing. That is to be open, transparent, and not be the labor guy. So he'll be under a lot of pressure to be not anti-labor certainly, but to be
fair and balanced.
To be fair and balanced, and that's a very good way to put it.
Right. So with the candidates who did not make it to the final, do you see any particular order into which they might go? Who do you think is going to go to Marty's camp? Who do you think is going to go to John Conley's camp? And of course, these are not final numbers. We're still waiting to see what that turns out to be, but we think that may be how it ends up.
That's my understanding.
With, as I said, 70% of the vote in, so it would be remarkable if that was not the final. It would be interesting because it's, you know, frankly, 22. I think Marty was at 22%, John was at 18%. Well, that means 60% of the vote is out there to be from the primary.
Right.
But the final always goes up, and the final will be it'll be more liberal, more progressive vote that comes out.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting. I think it's a dead heat. I mean, I really do. I don't think the 4 percentage points means very much, and I think it'll be a very exciting October and first week of November.
Well, I was going to say this campaign has been very cordial from the summer months and up until today.
Right.
Now the gloves come off.
I think so. I don't think there'll be. I think there'll be sharper edges. There'll be a little sharper elbows. I mean, after all, now the prize is right there for the two of them. The problem with the primary, frankly, there were just too many people in the race. It's virtually impossible for the print media and for the television media to cover 12 people.
Right.
You can't do it. And
although BNN did a fantastic job trying to get all the candidates in for both the mayor's race and the at-large race.
But sadly, you and I will say New England cable news was pretty good, but 4, 5, and 7
Right.
historically, who've been very good, haven't really paid much attention to this
Right.
mayor's race. And if you
Does that
it was-
surprise you? Because I mean, we haven't had the opportunity to really vote for a new mayor in
I'm
20
shocked.
years.
It's shocking, frankly, that there hasn't been more attention paid to the race. But I really think it's because there were too many candidates. I mean, and you can't say that folks shouldn't have run, but
Right.
it's just virtually impossible to cover 12 people.
Well, and there were a lot of good candidates. I think that's the distinction too, is that looking at who the candidates were, there really wasn't, there were a lot of good people to
There were.
choose from.
That's for sure. And the one televised debate was, it was a little bit of a free-for-all. It was chaotic. There were 7 or 8
Right.
good people, all who wanted to make a statement.
Yeah.
And it was just too disorganized and too chaotic. And I'm not blaming New England cable news. They actually televised it, and they were the,
Right.
besides BNN, they were the only folks who did. It was just too many people. And it was,
Right.
it would have been smarter, I think, just to kind of weed out. And there were 7 or 8 good candidates, very good
Right.
candidates.
Right.
And those would have been the folks to focus on.
Any candidates you think shouldn't have been in the race?
Oh, I don't know.
You don't want to say that.
Probably, but it's, if you look back, sure, there were
Well,
candidates that should have been in there.
And I think, there was certainly some discussion among the Black community to focus in and try to promote Charlotte to that finish line, which really ruffled the feathers of other candidates of color.
Right.
Do you think that, and I will say that she stepped back and said, hey, this isn't me that
Right.
was pushing for this. However, there were people involved in her campaign that were part of that momentum.
That's what I understand.
Do you think that backfired on her?
Maybe a little bit, but that certainly didn't cost her a spot in the top 2. I was impressed by John Barrows. It's not an easy thing to earn the endorsement of the Globe,
Right.
and he did. So even though he didn't, I'm not sure quite where he finished in the order here, but he ran a very good campaign, and he's a terrific young man, and with a great educational background, a commitment to his community, and served on the appointed school board. So that's pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, and somebody who might, as it turns out, end up in the next mayor's office if
I would.
if he so chooses.
I would reach out to John Barrows, and I can see Rob Consalvo, who is a personal favorite of mine, in part because he really is a wonk. He
Right.
reads Municipal Magazine Today and
Yeah.
implements the ideas. He's great. I
Yeah,
like him.
He
So-
loves Governing Magazine.
He does, and I like him, and I think he's got some good ideas, and he'll continue to contribute for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the at-large race. Are you hearing any of the finals for that? Because, of course, talking about a large field, this one had 19.
Sure, 19 to be soon 8. My understanding is Mike Flaherty, who's a former at-large counselor and candidate for mayor, is number 1. But there are very few results in, and it's certainly no surprise there.
Really?
The Michaels, he's number 1. I mean,
Right, and do you think that's because, obviously, he was the city council
Yes.
before, he was city council president, he ran for mayor before,
and
but-
it's the city council at-large race particularly is name recognition.
Yeah.
And people recognize Mike Flaherty's name. Frankly, even though he ran for mayor and lost, no one really walked away with a bad sense of Mike
Right.
Flaherty. So he's he's an impressive candidate. I think he'll do well in the new administration. He's been there, he's grounded. I think he will finish in the top 4 for sure.
Another person that people have been talking a lot about is Jack Kelley from Charlestown.
Yeah, I've met Jack, and I liked him. I'm not quite sure how he's going to finish, but he's got a nice story to tell, and I know he was involved with the mayor's office, and I think he was neighborhood services person
Yep.
over there one time.
Yes.
People in Charlestown like him. Now, I'm not quite sure how he ran and resonated citywide. I'm not sure that people understand how difficult it is to run a city-wide race for.
It's a lot harder than people.
It's very hard, very difficult, and there just isn't a lot of money. The mayor's
Right.
race kind of took up all the money and sucked all the oxygen out of the room, leaving very little discussion for the at-large race. But I think that'll change in the final 2.
And what about the incumbents, Ayanna Presley and Steve Murphy, who, of course, is council president?
I expect, my understanding right now is Mike Flaherty's first, but that could change. But I expect that Steve Murphy and Ayanna will be certainly comfortably in the top 4.
Right. And of course, right now, we're just whittling it down to 8, and then we'll go from here until November, and then it comes down to the 4.
Well, if you think there was little attention paid to the mayor's race, there was virtually no attention to the at-large city council race. But that'll change. I think, people are now in the election mode, and there's going to be a new mayor, and there are going to be people like me and others who are going to say, well, who are the city councilors going to be?
Right.
Let's focus on who these folks are. So,
Right. And I'm hearing
and it's
that with
important.
11% reporting it's Flaherty, Presley, Murphy, and Wu. And Michelle Wu is somebody that,
No surprise.
started out very early. She, of course, was on the Elizabeth Warren campaign, made a
Right.
lot of her roots here. She lives in the South End, has a great story. So I wouldn't be surprised to see her in that top 4 of the finishers.
Well, the good news for the at-large folks who are running, like Mike Flaherty and Michelle Wu, are the 2 vacancies.
Right.
And it's always easier when there are vacancies, simply because someone's going to win. And I've met Michelle Wu. She's very personable, likable, has a nice story to tell. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if it's Flaherty, Steve Murphy, and Ayanna Presley and Michelle Wu were the finalists.
Do you think, once we narrow it down to the 8 tonight, do you think that that order will change much between now and November?
It might. I think you'll see a more progressive vote. So, I think Ayanna, she finished first the last time. She may move up. But I think Mike Flaherty and Steve are 1, 2, and Ayanna probably may jump up into the top 2. Right. And Michelle probably will grab that 4th seat. Certainly, that's the way it seems right now.
Well, for all the talk that there weren't any women, except for Charlotte, running for mayor, we had a lot of women running for at-large. Are you surprised that not as many women ran for mayor, but we had 5, I think, candidates who were women running for at-large?
I think part of the issue with the mayor's race was that Mayor Menino really didn't decide until the very end, until it was very late, that he was going to not run for another term. So if there were other women out there who were thinking about it, considering it, it was just too late. And I think Charlotte got into the race late. But if there were other women, and I've heard, I can't think of anyone's name who was mentioned, and there may have been some, it was probably too late to raise the money and run a full-scale citywide campaign. John Conley has been running for mayor for 2 years.
Right.
And Marty Walsh had the ability to harness labor, that labor vote and the labor movement. And Dan Conley has been the DA running citywide and countywide for over 10 years. So,
do you think Dan Conley now runs for AG?
well, that's a good question. I've heard that rumor. I know Dan pretty well. I like him. He's very well respected as the DA. He's grounded. I don't know if Martha Kolke's running for governor, then there's certainly going to be a new AG. When I started off in politics, I worked for Frank Bellatti's campaign. Then I became an assistant AG, and I can tell you that there is no more exciting place to be if you're a lawyer than to be an assistant attorney general. It's great, and but it's a statewide race, and
Right.
Dan would have to go out and raise another couple of $1 million. Not easy.
No, definitely not easy, and that's one of the things.
But he's a terrific candidate, and I think he'd certainly be considered seriously for AG.
One of my theories all along has been that whoever becomes the next mayor might be the rebound mayor, if you will, sort of like a rebound boyfriend or girlfriend, because Mayor Menino has such a distinguished career behind him that people might think, well, I'll give this guy a shot, and in 4 years they might be tired of that person. Do you think something like that might hold true?
No.
Plain and simple.
It's a terrific idea to pause it, but I'll tell you why. That was the opinion a lot of folks had of Ray Flynn. That following Kevin White, he was going to be the interim mayor, and that someone else would take over in 4 years, and he served 10 distinguished years. So I think once you're in there, people get accustomed to you. They understand who you are, and they get accustomed, and I'd be surprised in light of and also in view of the fact that I don't think an incumbent mayor has lost in Boston in over 50 or 60 years.
We probably
so.
won't see another mayor have as long a tenure as Mayor Menino did, though.
Unlikely. I'm a big fan of term limits, and that's no criticism of anybody, but if we can term limit the President of the United States, and I think we should bring in new ideas every 2-3 terms or whatever the number is. Just bring in new people.
Speaking of new ideas, I'm going to welcome to the show Senator Sonia Chang Diaz, who has snuck in beside you.
That's okay. Nice to
She's
see
like
you,
my
Senator.
friend.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sure.
So, Senator, you were out on the campaign trail today for Charlotte. Was there anything that you noticed out there? Were you surprised about? Mike was just talking that the way he's seeing it and what he's hearing is that it's going to be Marty Walsh and John Connolly. Are you surprised by that? What is your take on the race today?
Well, so I'm still not calling it yet. You know, on the elevator up here to the studio, someone was showing me results, but I think they said 32 or 33% of precincts reporting in. So we still have a lot of results left to go. You know, for any of us any folks who were in the trenches a few special elections back. On the special election for the first Suffolk Senate seat, which was Linda Dorsey and Afori and Nick Collins. I mean, we didn't know until the very last minute.
Yeah, that went back and forth all
called
night.
it wrong, so we got a lot yet to go. So in terms of surprises on the campaign, I mean, this wasn't a total surprise, but something that's just so markedly different from most other elections, certainly that I've been involved with, was just the number of undecided voters. You know, walking into I was stationed at one of our voting locations in Jamaica Plain, and I mean, literally people in the sort of, you know, 30 yards between the door and they're filling in the bubble, they're still making up their minds. And so there are a lot of people. I mean, normally on election day, I would much prefer to be on the doors rather than at the polling station, because by the time people get to the polling station, they've made up their minds. But today there were several voters that I talked to where I mean, it made me feel very useful at the polling station, because I was really helping people, you know, work through their final decision-making process.
I was surprised at that too. At work today, somebody at work told me that she was undecided, and this was at 1:30 in the afternoon. And so she was going home tonight, and she was going to be voting. And you know, for somebody, or the three of us who I'm sure pretty much knew who our candidate would be all along, when you get to the polling location, to really still not have an idea of who you might vote for is kind of shocking. But
well, I mean, I was very empathetic because I didn't make up my mind until last week. You know, and that's really late for me.
Well, there were good candidates. I mean, you know, there were 6 or 7 candidates who made impassioned pleas as to why they should be mayor. And so I'm not entirely, I agree with the senator, that there were a lot of people that were undecided. And I think they made up their mind within the last few days.
Charlotte was your first choice, but who would have been your second choice if you had to?
Oh, goodness, that's a question I'm not prepared for. You know, I'm going to say, thankfully, that it's a decision that the ballot doesn't force me to make, and it was hard enough for me to make a first choice that I honestly couldn't tell you. I'd probably have to agonize over it for several more weeks before I could tell you who would have been my second choice.
We were also talking about the at-large race and just how many good candidates there were for the to whittle it down to the 8. Anybody that stood out to you as somebody that you really want to see on the Boston City Council?
Well, I mean, first of all, Ayanna Pressley, I want to make sure she gets back on there. I think she's a huge talent. But I suspect your question was more about new
blood, because we, of course, have 2 seats, 2 open seats.
Michelle Wu, I think, is a real standout candidate. And that I really saw evidence of. I mean, I endorsed her, you know, so put all my cards on the table. But I also saw a lot of evidence of her hard work over the last several months, of all of the comers for the at-large seats that I saw, you know, signs and people for at the polling station today. Most frequently I was hearing from voters, of my 4 votes, I know I'm giving 1 to Michelle. So I think we're going to see her make it certainly into the final cut, and I suspect she'll make it into and onto the council in the end.
What are some of your concerns for the city moving forward? Issues that you think need to be focused on?
Well, I've been really pleased to see a very heavy focus on education issues in this race. And
I know you're a new mother. We should announce that. I'm sure you've.
I brought my daughter with me to the studio tonight, actually. So
congratulations
she'll give
on
me
that.
a review when I get off the stage.
Exactly.
But thank you for the
You're
congrats.
welcome.
Yeah, so I've got new skin in the game in that sense, but it has always been an issue of primary focus for me. I chair the education committee on the state legislative level, and there's so much interlacing between city level policy and state level policy. So it's an issue I'm really pleased to see the candidates focusing so heavily on this year. So I'll be watching for that, and I know most other voters will be in the general election. Safety is another big one.
Yes, obviously the new mayor is going to have a Boston Police Commissioner to select.
Right.
Right, new commissioner, new
Superintendent.
superintendent of the schools.
Yeah.
A lot of exciting choices to be made.
Any other people that we think might need to be replaced, for example, will the Boston Fire Commissioner leave? Other people that may decide to, once Mayor Menino finishes out his term, might say, okay, well, I've done my time here, it's time to move on.
Well, I think you have to take into consideration many of them are union-protected jobs. So, but certainly the police commissioner, the fire commissioner serve at the pleasure of the mayor. I would, and there are certainly others, advisors, close advisors to the mayor, who would most likely leave. So, I mean, the new mayor will bring in his own team, for
Right.
sure.
Or hers.
Or hers. What should the next police commissioner focus on? Obviously, there's been a lot of talk recently about the need to promote minority police officers up through the ranks. There was an article in the Globe. A couple of the sergeants who were talked about, one being Jim Claiborne, who I will give a plug to because I think he's a fantastic man. But is that something that whoever comes in next is going to have to focus on, making sure that they're actually mentoring the police officers coming in, men, women, of all ethnicities, to make sure that we're elevating people as they come in?
I would say yes, sure, of course. And I'd give a second to Jim Claiborne.
He's great.
He's great. I've known him a long time. He's terrific. I think Ed Davis, Commissioner Davis, was unfairly tarnished with his, that he didn't promote diversity. I think he did.
Right.
There's always room for improvement, and I suspect the next mayor will, with his commission, to do that, improve diversity and make it the Boston Police Department more reflective of the residents.
Senator?
Yeah, I would second that. I think certainly it's an issue I would like to see the next commissioner focus on, not just in the mentoring department, although certainly I think that's part of the solution, but also continuing the process that Commissioner Davis has set into motion of really taking a good hard look at the civil service exam process and saying, is this getting us the kind of talent, black, white, green, blue, purple, whatever, but is this getting us the skill set that we want in our public safety leadership?
Absolutely. Well, Mike McCormack, Senator Chang Diaz, I want to thank you both for being here. We're going to throw it back to Joe, who has a couple of new guests joining us tonight.
Great.
So, Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Seth. Yeah, we're back in Studio B, continuing our coverage of election 2013. The results are coming fast and furious now, and we'll have some updates for you in just a few minutes. But I want to very quickly introduce some special guests joining me in this segment. On my immediate left, he is, of course, former head of the Boston Firefighters Union. Now he is the president of the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts. I'm talking, of course, about Eddie Kelley. Eddie, nice to have you here joining us.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
And also joining us, former Boston Phoenix staff writer and now doing a lot of freelance work. I like to call him muckraker extraordinaire, a good friend, excellent journalist. Chris Faraone joins us. And Chris, nice to have you here as well, guys. Well, this is coming fast and furious. And let's first quickly go to the latest results that we have with roughly 40% of the numbers coming in. And if we can bring them up on the screen, I think we're showing roughly the same what we had before, which is Marty Walsh and John Connolly in the lead, and behind them now Charlotte Golar-Ritchie moving up into third, and Dan Connolly, the Suffolk DA. Again, this is with 42% of the precincts reporting unofficial results, so we'll warn you about that, although these are coming through the City of Boston Election Department, and we believe they are accurate. Again, Marty Walsh, 25%. John Connolly, 18.5%. Charlotte Ritchie, 11.9%. And Suffolk DA Dan Conley. We'll have numbers for the rest very shortly. Of course, this field broad and very interesting field. Guys, I don't think anybody knew what was going to happen tonight. I mean, depending upon who you ask, everybody has their kind of favorite, their thought. Eddie, let's start with you. Of course, the Boston Firefighters Union endorsed Marty Walsh. So looking at those numbers, they've got to be very happy. You've got to be very happy as well.
It's an exciting time. You know, as a City of Boston resident, this is really the first time in my adulthood that we've been in the position where we've had a very legitimate open seat mayor's race, and it's exciting. And we had a great bevy of candidates, and it's going to be interesting to see how the results come in tonight.
Well, that certainly is. And Chris, you've been following him. You've been following a lot of things, but you know, I don't know at this point whether we could say there's any surprises. But what surprised you about the race as you've been following and covering? And I know you do that very intensely.
Yeah, I mean, I've been writing about it for months now, so it's wild when it comes down to this. I think my biggest surprise is the smallest surprise, which is that Marty Walsh had thousands of people on the street, literally. I was expecting it, but the extent to which it really was. I was explaining out before we came on that, you know, I went to about 10 precincts between Dorchester and South Boston early in the day, and there were at least 4 Walsh supporters at every precinct. But in addition to that, every intersection, every major street corner, it was a mob scene, and there were signs everywhere and people greeting voters. So it was a get out the vote effort like I've never seen in Boston.
Well, and of course, sometimes people like to, you know, I know maybe denigrate isn't the right word, but suggest that while labor support is always helpful, especially in terms of raising money, the numbers that it actually translates to, how many live in the city of Boston, is a whole nother thing. Eddie, you know, there were, I think the estimates were that there were as many as 2,000 volunteers out there for Marty Walsh today. How should people see labor's support for him? And it's not across the board. Of course, many unions, some other unions endorsed other candidates, but he certainly seemed to benefit from union support.
Well, I think that, you know, Marty in his tenure in the legislature has had to take tough votes, and in many, many cases he stood up for working families. And I think Labor, a lot of members of Labor respect that, but there's also been some votes, in charter schools comes to mind, where Marty has not taken a vote for Labor and drawn the ire of the teachers' unions in particular. And there's been other instances where in my time lobbying as the Executive Vice President of the Mass AFL-CIO for Public Employees, where Marty has said explicitly, you're wrong, we need to make changes, and he stands strong in his convictions, even at his own expense sometimes.
So that, well, at least some of the criticism that was leveled towards him, that he couldn't, and if he were elected mayor, would not be able to stand up to the public sector unions. Don't buy it?
I don't buy it, because I've dealt with them on many issues where when it comes to a principal vote, like something he believes in, like collective bargaining, then he stands strong in his principles. But there's also times when he knows, like municipal health insurance comes to mind, where the unions were standing strong, that they felt that any change was a direct infraction to benefits that we had negotiated, and he said, no, you're wrong. The municipalities need relief, and we need to make those changes. And that was really, it was his, influence over labor that really meant to make that law, what it is today.
Well, and of course, Chris, jump in here, because labor unions traditionally have held great influence, especially on democratic politics, progressive politics. This is a nonpartisan race, obviously, but
it is, and it's a municipal election, and I think when you think about even how many union workers I know who read the Herald, who read union bashing publications, watch Fox News, that's more of a national thing, and we saw a lot of labor support Scott Brown individually, for example, but this is a city election, and Marty Walsh is their guy, and I think it's time that and Marty Walsh has been proud to be union. It's not like he's been kind of skirting the issue here. But this is the time that if it is him and John Connolly, he has to turn John Connolly into the anti-union candidate. And I think that just this preliminary alone is going to show that union is not a dirty word, at least not in Boston, at least not in this city at this juncture. And most importantly, it's going to come down to, all right, so a lot of people have a problem with union money coming from outside of Massachusetts. Well, how about bank money? How about money from some of these these lending institutions, which have foreclosed on half of Boston? So,
What should be good for the goose should be good for the gander as well. Perhaps not as much.
I think that if
that been
someone's going to, absolutely, it's been overlooked. I mean, I've been combing through the campaign finance records for a while. There's a lot of, not always Bank of America, say, giving as a whole, but certainly, upper level management giving, and it's totally been untouched in this campaign. But you will see it in the final stretch.
Well,
Joe,
go
I think
ahead.
I'd add too that it is, labor is about chasing the American dream, providing the middle class an avenue to the middle class. And like Chris said, I don't think Marty shies away from that. I think he wears that as a badge of honor. But there's other aspects to Marty that a lot of people don't give him credit for. And I'll give you a quick story. A friend of mine, West Roxbury, 6 months ago, when the candidates were just emerging, saw a friend of his, neighbor, in a coffee shop and said, "Who do you like in these mayoral candidates?" And this individual, this fella said, "I don't get involved in politics. I've never given them any money. I've never put a bumper sticker on my car, but I'm going to work for that kid, Marty Walsh." And he said, "Why? What about Marty that is making you make this change?" And he said, "Well, I had an issue in my family. My daughter had a problem with substance abuse, and she was sick in my house, in my living room. It was 2:30 in the morning. I started calling people. I didn't know what to do. And sometime later, I talked to this fellow who showed up at my house, took her to treatment, picked her up in treatment, took her to meetings, and got her life straightened out, got her sober." And it turned out that person was Marty Walsh, who didn't do it for fanfare, didn't do it to try to get a vote 5 years down the road. It's who he is. And I think that the more people in Boston get to know who Marty Walsh is, I think that they're going to like him.
Well, they may get a chance to see more of him, at least the early numbers showing that he's amongst the top two, the leader at this point. But go ahead, Chris.
I just want to chime in on that note is that, we're going to hear over and over, especially anecdotally, I don't think we'll ever really know exactly how many union members, how many people are on the street, although I've heard estimates of 3,000 range. But what will go a little more unspoken is how many people from recovery, how many people from AA and other programs are out there. I've heard this over and over for months.
That might be part of the army of volunteers
I
as well.
I believe that it is.
I want to go now very quickly. Again, joining me in the studio, Ed Kelley. He is the president of the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts, former Boston Firefighters Union head, and journalist Chris Faraone. We do have some new numbers now, and this is now with approximately 59% of the vote counting, and it's coming very quickly now, and this is the latest of what we have, and it's showing no change in the top four. Certainly, Marty Walsh, an early leader, appears to be continuing to hold that lead, though John Connolly in second seems to be creeping up on him a bit. He's at 18.5%. Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, whom some people thought could end up in the top two and may still, she's back at 12%. Dan Connolly, Suffolk DA, is at 11.3% again, and we will bring you the results for the other candidates very shortly. Guys, I want to go back to this because, and Eddie, not to shine the light on you, but certainly talking about journalists, and the Boston Globe has pointed the finger at the Boston firefighters, their contract, and saying that the area that's perhaps ripe for change is the Boston firefighters contract. I know it took you a long time to negotiate that contract, so I don't ask this question lightly, but and in that context, they said Marty Walsh may not be able to, isn't the person that could negotiate a new contract with the Boston Firefighters. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that, Mayor Menino deserves great credit for the stability in the city. It's actually probably economically booming right now. There's tower cranes in all neighborhoods in the city. People are working. People want to live here. There's the housing market is really, property values through the roof. And one of the things that has been very challenging in this city under the Menino administration is negotiating with the labor unions, with the people that make this city work. And time again, we found ourselves going to a third-party arbitrator, basically taking a case to court. And in the time that I negotiated, which was not a negotiation, ended up basically a court case before
Arbitration,
an independent,
Yeah.
neutral.
Right.
We gladly would have settled for a lot less than we ended up with. But because we were forced to get into that back and forth, it took us down a road that really we didn't want to go. And I think that the most important thing that you need at the table, whether it's a bargaining table with unions or trying to solve any problem that you're facing, whether it's schools, violence, all the challenges that our city faces, you need someone that can bring parties together, someone that can bridge divides. And I feel strongly that I've worked with Marty, and I've been told no by Marty and chastised by Marty, but also taught by Marty. And I think that that's really where his leadership and stewardship in this city that is so vibrant because of the stewardship of Mayor Menino, it can really improve even more from where we are right now.
Well, and Chris, I want to bring you into this as well. But I also want to ask you this, because you've been covering this, and there was some thought that this year, given the changes in demographics, the changes in the city in total, that we weren't necessarily going to elect another white Irish Catholic man, and not to put that down, but looking at those numbers, it's looking like we may be going back to those years.
I mean, the numbers are fluctuating right now. We don't know what we're going to see with Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, of course. John Barrows, who surged, as everyone's saying, and of course got half of the Globe endorsement. There just wasn't the get out the vote effort. So I was at several precincts today, and even in Dorchester, where I'd written a column a couple weeks ago about how the race there was really a four-person race with Bill Walczak, after Marty and John Barrows and Charlotte, of course. But even that really just didn't seem to come together. The Barrows people weren't there. Maybe a few signs. I also just want to say, if we're talking about labor, I think that the teachers are the ones to watch at this point. Marty Walsh has, every time he's been asked, when did you not, when did you, when did you really stand up to labor? He's used the teachers' contract as an example, or he's used the Boston Teachers Union as an example. And really, and then we're talking John Conley on the other side, who of course almost took an endorsement from Stanford Children. I bet that money's about to be back in play. That's, of course, corporate education reform. Once again, back to, who are the players behind that? Bain Capital, Walmart. I think these are all issues that were kind of really tangential in the run-up to this. But now, it's not going to be popular to not be friends with the Boston Teachers Union anymore. This is a massive force. Of course, they endorsed in this race Felix Arroyo and Rob Consalvo, right. But I didn't see them out there with any particular placards or with T-shirts enforced today. But watch, I can't wait to see how that moves forward. That's a huge, piece of this puzzle.
Well, we've got just a couple of minutes yet, and again, joining us live in studio, the president, the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts. We're talking about Ed Kelley, who's a Boston boy, and of course our good friend Chris Faraone, now a freelance journalist, but never seems to hold anything back. The numbers at this point showing in the mayor's races is that Marty Walsh on top. Again, this is now with nearly 60% of the returns in. These are unofficial returns, but coming through the city of Boston, showing him holding on to a lead. John Connolly creeping up now, nearing 19%. Charlotte Golar-Ritchie at 12%. and Suffolk DA Dan Conley in fourth place, a little over 11%. Do we have the, I'm not sure if we have the results for the others. We'll bring those to you very shortly. Guys, we've got just a couple minutes left. Shape this race for us. If it's the top two, and here we go. We've got some numbers for, this is the at-large city council race. The top 8 go on to the final, and you can see Michael Flaherty, of course, former council president, Ayanna Presley, who's our current councilor, Steve Murphy, current councilor, Michelle Wu, kind of a bright young candidate that's showed up on the scene. Jack Kelley, coming out of Charlestown, seems to be doing quite well there. Again, these are small percentages. Isabi George, Nisa Isabi George, Marty Keogh is in there, and Jeff Ross, an activist, political activist. Catherine Neal is 9th at this point, and Althea Garrison, perennial candidate. They're at 10th. This is out of 19 candidates, a rather large field. And I'm not sure if we have any of the district races. This is District 8, and this is the same number we reported earlier. This is with only 4.5% of the precincts reporting. Josh Zakum with a huge lead in that race. Again, the top 2 go on. At this point, it's very close for the second spot between Realtor Tom Dooley and Michael Nichols, who's the chief of staff at the Boston City Council. Again, those are very early numbers in that race. And we're also following, of course, a District 5 race. That's an open seat. That is the seat given up by Rob Consalvo. That's got 8 candidates. It's also a District 4 race and one in District 1 involving incumbents. Guys, shape this race. We've got just a couple minutes left here. Shape this race. If it's Walsh and Connolly, what are the issues that emerge in your mind? Very quickly, Eddie Kelley.
I think that, John Conley did a good job of establishing himself as the schools candidate, but I think schools are important to everybody, whether you're looking at it as the economic engine of the future or the trouble that we have right now. But Marty Walsh is another person that has a plan for the schools and focused on the schools, and as we said, has taken some tough votes on that. But the schools have about 100,000 students, and a lot of the probably 50,000 parents. So that means there's another 600,000 residents in the city that have a lot of other issues. I think crime is a major problem in the city, public safety in general. And when you think about what people pay their taxes for, what they want in return for them, if you don't have your kids in a public school, you want to make sure that your roads and your bridges, that your infrastructure, that the future of the city is in good hands, and that you focus on economic development, but also that if you pick up the phone to dial 911, you're getting the best services that you can.
And Chris Faraone, did John Connolly perhaps? Well, he's second according to those numbers. Yeah. Again, still a little more than half of the vote in, but did he make a mistake by putting all his eggs in one basket, focusing so heavily on schools?
Not if he makes it through tonight. I mean, that's when you literally overhearing people speaking about him. He's the education candidate, whether it's true or not, or that's what he's seen as, and I think it's helped. But I think that really the two things, let's say if it is Walsh and Connolly, the two things to look at going forward are one, the Boston Teachers Union, like I said. 2, Hyde Park. Who gets the support of Hyde Park? This is a fifth of the electorate. This is Mayor Menino's backyard.
You talking about Hyde Park, or you talking about Mayor Menino's machine?
I mean both, but I mean Hyde Park also. I mean, Hyde Park is really split here. We have former, Dan Conley used to be the councilor there. Of course, he moved on up to West Roxbury, and Rob Consalvo. Hyde Park is, if you look at that heat map that the Globe put up, everybody's voting. Southie, I understand the vote wasn't what people expected. Hyde Park's still there. Who's going to get Hyde Park? Judging by the relationships between the candidates and the mayor, I think we could come to some conclusions about that, but I guess it really does have yet to be seen.
Well, again, tonight on this special edition of Talking to the Neighborhoods, we're waiting. We're, like all of you, following the results. The numbers are pouring in. The early returns are showing some that many expected to finish well, doing well, others not so. We'll be getting more of those returns as we continue our coverage. We're going to go now back to my colleague, guest host Seth McCoy joins us with a couple of very special guests to talk more about today's election. Seth?
Thanks, Joe. Joining me now, Kevin Peterson, Barry Lawton, and on the phone, Representative Carlos Henriquez. Carlos, are you there? How are you? Can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I have the background music playing, home music.
Because you're out there on the campaign trail. For folks at home who don't know, you were actively supporting John Barrow, so you've been working very hard trying to get him to the final two. Kevin and Barry have been working on Charlotte's behalf. As it looks right now, we're looking at a final between Marty Walsh and John Connolly. Charlotte is, at this point in time, pulling in third place. Anything, I'll start with you, Kevin, anything about today surprising you? How do you feel about where your candidate is ending up, or looks to be ending up?
Well, I'm a bit surprised that she has, her ground campaign has not exhibited the strength that others expected her campaign to produce at this point in time. It was projected that she would be able to win a plurality of her base precincts. There were about 65 to 80 precincts that were critical for her to win. It appears that the campaign has not generated enough energy during the day to produce that. Now the results are not in,
Right.
and historically, just in terms of being a mechanic around this sort of stuff, black precincts usually come in towards the end of the day. There's no prejudice or discrimination about that. So there's still opportunity to see a win for Charlotte Ritchie, and I'm hoping that that's the fact.
And Representative Henriquez, you, as I mentioned, were supporting John Barrows. How do you feel his game went today? Obviously, a lot of people were talking about what really matters is the get out the vote today, not everything that led up to today. John had a great endorsement by the Boston Globe. What do you think could have been done differently in that campaign?
Well, I want to say, thanks for having me on too. I'm still getting a little. I think I can still hear Joe's mic in my ear, so I'm listening to two conversations. But I wish if we had maybe another week or two, another month. I think John ran a great campaign. The endorsements from the large groups are fine. It's really been a campaign focused on grassroots. And it's a little bit of an enigma, this campaign. To have so many qualified candidates on the ballot for people to look at, some with more name recognition than others because of their elected positions. All that stuff plays. So. I'm not mad at the effort at all. Much like Kevin just said, we're still watching the results come in, and like he said, we are still banking on some high wards and precincts that might come out in our favor and hopefully tip the scale. So we'll keep hope until the last minute. But I think the campaign, obviously the goal is to win. But what I've seen the campaign do for different people all across Boston, but specifically for the district I represent as well, has just been phenomenal.
Yeah. It's been great burst of energy for everybody to be talking about all the candidates. Certainly with a number this great, it was hard to hear from the different candidates what their positions were, if they were different from X candidate versus Y candidate. Barry, there's going to be, regardless of where Charlotte turns up, where John Barrows turns out, we're going to have a new mayor. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think that means that there will be a new energy in the office, a new zeal. I think things will happen very quickly. We will see that probably materialize when we come up with the final results from tonight. But I think, overall, and I want to address a little bit of what Representative Henriquez says about it being a good effort. It's a good and a poor effort because, for communities of color, have not, because of the turnout and the disconnect and the new Bostonians that are coming in, they have not been able to coalesce around a message or around a unity of purpose. So there was the ability to be able to run a relay race and get across the finish line first. And at some point, we had that conversation. There was a lot of hypersensitivity to even having that conversation, but basic math would dictate the logic in even examining that type of thing. So I'm very excited about what's going to be coming up, because now if the results hold up currently the way they are, we're going to have two candidates that are going to have a very different conversation with Boston.
Mm-hmm. Getting back to what you were just saying, though, about coalescing behind one particular candidate, do you think that needs to happen a lot sooner than certainly there was discussion just, a few weeks ago to rally behind your candidate, Charlotte, and whether or not that conversation needs to happen, for example, tomorrow or 4 years from now?
Absolutely. As we had a conversation in the primary among minority candidates, so-called minority candidates should have that conversation tomorrow, because there are certain and specific needs that are specific to the to minority communities that now need to be put on the table in terms of how the mayoral race progresses. So if the trends hold out as they are now, the wiser people in our community should be prepared to have a conversation tomorrow about what it means to be Black or Latino or Cape Verdean in this city in terms of education and jobs and housing. So that's an immediate concern that I would push for as early as tomorrow. There is nothing wrong in and of itself for specific groups to be talking about how they can coalesce to impact political races in terms of their concentrated power.
Right.
That's what we talked about in terms of the Black community weeks ago. That conversation needs to be advanced into this final mayoral race.
Representative, do you think would you agree that conversation needs to happen ASAP so that the community can be on the same page and move forward the agenda that will benefit the community?
Absolutely. And I agree. You're sitting with, two of the amazing constituents that live in the same district as myself, the same representative district. And I think that conversation should start tomorrow. I would love to have breakfast with whoever wants to have that conversation. I think it starts tomorrow and continues consistently all the way through. And I don't think we're waiting for 4 years. I think we're looking at statewide races next year. I think we're looking at, state races next year. I think we're looking at municipal elections next year after that, and it should be a continuous conversation that we have. So I'm more than happy to sit down with Barry and sit down with Kevin and everybody that wants to come to the table to figure out how we fix the disproportionate ills that affect our communities differently than other communities in Boston.
Absolutely.
One of the things, though, I want to bring up is that there was also a forum that excluded non-minority candidates. Is this something that you think is helpful moving forward? Because I'm going to editorialize here. I don't think it's helpful at all. I think we need to be a city that's united, and doing things like that does nothing to advance anybody's agenda.
I think it's less and less about color. I mean, I think you have seen it in some of the races. If you looked at the special election with Nick Collins and Linda Dorsina, there was a lot of crossover there. People are identifying more with the message now than the messenger, because you have this salesman type things, and you need leadership. So they're looking for ideas. So I think color is less important in that aspect. But in the other aspect, when you look at the unity, at the problems that are common to people of color, I mean, it could be any kind of people living in those communities that they're effective. You've got infrastructure problems, you've got employment problems, you have public safety problems, public health problems. These need to be addressed. And although some of these are state issues, the city needs to be more in an advocacy role to bring more resources back to our community.
And Seth, I think the representative would agree that had South Boston held such a forum, Barry, and myself would have been outraged.
Oh, absolutely.
So when I heard about this,
we would have crashed it.
Yeah. So when I heard about this forum being held at the Freedom House, which is an historic institution within our community that really was established around racism in South Boston schools and education, I was outraged. So my response to that is that Boston should no longer hold any forums which are racially exclusionary.
I agree. And
I don't know if that was their intention to do that. I think that they were neophytes in the forum game,
Right.
and they wanted to try to have a conversation to put issues on the table that weren't on the table.
Which I think you hit the nail on the head, though, in that a lot of those issues that they want to bring up, or this group wanted to bring up, are issues that impact all residents of Boston in
Correct.
some form or
right.
another. I mean, obviously, to different extents depending on where you are in the city, but they're issues that we can all relate to and all want addressed.
Right.
I just want to mention real quickly that we do have some final numbers for District 1, which of course is the North End, East Boston, Charlestown, and parts of Beacon Hill, and that is Sal LaMattina and Brian Gannon are the top 2 vote getters. And also the mayor's race, we do have 95% reporting, and right now it's Walsh, Connolly, and that's John Connolly. Third is Charlotte Gola-Ritchie, and fourth is Dan Connolly. So not much changing since we first started the program this evening.
But it was a little bit of a surprise. We did not expect Marty Walsh to be first, and coming in today, we didn't expect Charlotte Gola-Ritchie to be at 13. She was expected to be at around 11 or 12, and just eke out whoever was the second place.
Why do you think she
finisher.
had such a surge at the end here?
I think it was just more education. I think that, after Labor Day, people started focusing on the campaign a little bit more, and they started to look at the paradigm of the mayor's office and seeing that there was a change. This was a very short race. Reality creates its own structure. So, the traditional ways of campaigning went out the door when you had a 6-month campaign to do this. But I expect that tomorrow, after tomorrow, it'll be a more orderly campaign, and there'll be ample opportunity for people of color and other constituencies across the community to get their issues on the table.
I will say that I live on Fort Hill, and I was probably hit with a piece from Charlotte every single day this past week. So if that
It
says
showed
anything.
it showed a significant
Post
surge.
office is happy, that's for sure.
Well, these were not even mailers. This was
Yeah.
hand delivery,
Yeah.
like on the porch.
Yeah,
So-
it shows a significant surge in her campaign. The unfortunate thing is that Charlotte got into the race late. I believe the latest.
Yes,
So
that is true.
had she made the decision a month earlier, she may have been a little more competitive
Absolutely.
today.
Do we think that the commercial that was put out, Louis Gossett Jr. was the star of, if you will, was that helpful? Some people that I spoke to found it a little off-putting. They felt that we were maybe reverting back to 1970s Boston and not looking to the future as to where the city has come and where it can go.
May have been a little anachronistic. My feedback I heard from being an advisor to the campaign and a volunteer to the campaign, by the way, was that their memory of Louis Gossett Jr. Reverts back to the series Roots, where he played not Chicken George but Fiddler. So it was anachronistic in terms of it just reverting back to a very historic series, but one that went back to the 70s.
Yep.
And a lot of young Bostonians in particular didn't make the connection.
That's exactly who I'm talking about, the
Yeah.
young Bostonians. Representative, did you find the same to be true? Were people, did you hear that people were put off by that commercial, or do you have any
No,
thoughts
not
about
at
it?
all. I tested. I asked a lot of people younger than me, and I was joking around. I said, "Who do you like better, Danny Gloves or Lou Gossett?" And the thing on your age group bracket, most people under 30 said, "Who?" So I don't think it was divisive in any way, and I think that both Charlotte and John caught fire later on, but I think they both surged at a good time. I thought we surged, and I think Charlotte really surged after the Boston Herald televised debate. I think she really found her niche and went from there. But I do have to say my candidate just walked in, and I need to give this man a hug.
Yes.
So I want to bid you guys farewell and say thank you.
Well, we want to thank you for calling in, as
especially to my
always.
two constituents. I would love to meet with you guys for breakfast, so please let me know when, and I'll be there.
Tomorrow morning we can.
You guys can call. You can call each other after the show and figure it out. But I want to thank you so much for being here on the phone, and do tell John we wish him well, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from him down the line.
This is our numbers guy, by the way, who's
You're getting numbers calling in right
giving us
now.
updates on how people are doing and where.
So I think we have some final, or 96% of the at-large candidates reporting. So right now on your screen are the top four for mayor. That's Marty Walsh, John Conley, Charlotte Goler-Ritchie, and Dan Connolly. Do we have the numbers for the at-large? So results right now with 96% reporting, 95.5% actually, is Ayanna Pressley, Michael Flaherty, Councilor Murphy, Michelle Wu, Marty Keogh, Jeff Ross, Anissa Asabi-George, Jack Kelley, Catherine O'Neill, and Althea
What's
Garrison.
so impressive for me among that list is the resurgence of Flaherty.
Absolutely. Are you surprised at that?
It's impressive. I am surprised that he is running within less of 1 percentage point of the city council at-large candidate
Yeah, and I
who
wanna-
won by a large
And you have
margin.
an outstanding
Right.
showing by
2 years ago.
Michelle Wu, which is, just
Right.
really a outstanding effort.
And I want to mention that from here we go down to 8. So Jack Kelley is in the 8th spot, and Catherine O'Neill right now is in the 9th spot. So we might see some adjustments there. It's pretty tight between Anissa, Jack, and Catherine. So those could fluctuate a little bit. But for the most part, that looks like what may be the final 8.
There are some real newcomers, including Wu, but also Marty Keogh, who worked in the city council some
Yep.
years ago.
For Peggy Davis Muller.
Peggy Davis
Absolutely,
Muller.
Yeah.
absolutely.
He looks to, he's having an
He's
impressive
been,
showing.
been ubiquitous.
And Jeff Ross is also a newcomer. He was state committee, but he obviously saw an opportunity to run for
A liberal out of the
at-large.
South End.
Yep.
Who will be challenged in some ways
He will,
within
but
the
he's
liberal.
been campaigning hard as well.
within-
All of them, are really a good crop of candidates, and I think that that's going to bode well for turnout in November.
Absolutely. We also have 100% of District 8 reporting, which is Back Bay, Beacon Hill, Fenway, and Mission Hill, and Josh Zakum is the top vote getter there, followed by Mike Nichols. So that probably not too surprising there. I think people pretty much had that called
Well,
down the line.
Lenny did an awful lot for this community, and he raised Josh, I'm sure the same way. So we're looking forward to his campaign and ultimately his election.
Absolutely. What do you guys think is going to be the top concern as the candidates for mayor, as it looks now, Marty Walsh, John Connolly? What do you think their game is going to be now? Obviously, there are a lot of votes that they're going to need to go after from the different candidates that were in this race. So if you were advising them, what is the first piece of advice?
Briefly, if you don't mind, Barry, briefly, I think the overall theme is innovation. So there's innovation in housing and in education, innovation in city services. So the overall theme, as I see it, how do we take this city to a new level in an innovative way, using new technologies and a new sense of how cities move forward. Boston is probably one of the top 10 cities, not in the city, in the world.
Right.
So how do we use this innovation concept and move the city forward?
Yep. Barry?
I would look at less of tinkering and a more comprehensive view of running the city, because there are many issues that are interrelated. And when you look at the crime and the public safety issue, that is directly related to the school. When you look at the school issue, I know a lot of the burden falls on the teachers, but we only have the kids 34 hours a week. So a lot of it has to do with outside. You need to come up with ideas that have worked. New Deal programs to help us rebuild our infrastructure. Those types of conversations, good ideas that will resonate. And I think when you had so many candidates in such a short campaign, ideas, it was very hard to get them out. I think right now there's going to be a greater demand for tangible ideas and not just chicken in every pot. How are we going to get there? How are we going to pay for it?
Well, and obviously a lot of what's going to happen next are those two candidates, top vote getters, are going to be going after the candidates who didn't finish in the top 2 spots. Do you have any inclination as to where Charlotte may go? Too early to say. If you were advising her, calling her up right now and saying, I think you should back this person, who would that be?
Well, it's not too early to say. I think it is early enough to say that Charlotte should be looking at the best interest of those people, looking after the best interest of those people who supported her. And so as she begins to bargain, to engage with the other top-tier candidates, she should be mindful that she has a significant constituency, and that she should be engaging and bargaining and looking forward towards the rest of this campaign in terms of what she can deliver for those people who supported her. Mostly.
Absolutely. Kevin Peterson, I want to thank you. Barry Lawton, I want to thank you. Representative Carlos Henriquez was on the phone. And right now I'm going to toss it back to Joe Heisler. Joe, take it away.
All right, we're back in studio with more of the special edition of Talking the Neighborhoods tonight, election 2013. And the field is nearly set. Certainly it looks to be the case. The numbers now nearing 100%. And as Seth updated you on several of those races, the top finishers that will go on to the final election in November are becoming clearer and clearer, although earlier today I don't think anybody could have told you for certain who would be finishing in the top. Again, let's go through some of the numbers here. Very quickly, District 1, the incumbent Sal Matina, no surprise there, seems to be sweeping the field. His nearest opponent, anti-casino activist Brian Gannon, is currently in second. John Ribeiro, a businessman, in third. That may portend somewhat of what we may see in the referendum on the casino vote. And in District 8, again, this is with 100% reporting. And Josh Zakem, the scion of renowned anti-discrimination activist Lenny Zakem, the late Lenny Zakem, clearly with a huge lead there, 45%. Michael Nichols, who is the chief of staff of the Boston City Council, seems to be comfortably in second. Gloria Murray, Tom Dooley, Angelica Advinola is last in that. And if we have the other districts, well, let's first go to the at-large race. And this is nearly complete, but this is roughly 96% reporting. And as expected, Ayanna Pressley topping the field. Michael Flaherty attempting a comeback yet again, appears to be on his way, comfortably in second place. Steve Murphy, the city council president, in third. And Michelle Wu, a newcomer, Harvard Law School graduate, former city employee, doing very well, appears to be in fourth place. The rest of the field, attorney Marty Keogh is fifth. Jeff Ross, a political activist, in sixth. Saibi George Anissa in seventh. And Jack Kelley from Charlestown in eighth. And that would be the where the cutoff would be for the runoff. The top 8 go on in the large race. Catherine O'Neill, former colleague of ours here at BNN TV, and a playwright and Dorchester political activist in ninth. That may not be set yet, depending upon where the votes that are left to be counted are coming in. In 10th, perennial candidate Althea Garrison. And now we go back to the results for the in the mayor's race, and this is nearly complete as well. And as he has all night, Marty Walsh, State Representative Marty Walsh from Savin Hill, Dorchester, holding on to the lead. John Conley, the at-large councilor from West Roxbury, who's been in second, still there, creeping up a little closer. Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, former state representative, back into third place, and where she's been holding on all night. And Dan Connolly, the Suffolk DA, still in fourth place. And that looks nearly set as well. Again, these are unofficial returns, yet they're coming from Boston City Hall, and we believe they will be verified and accurate. Joining me now, live in studio from the north end of Boston, State Representative Aaron Michlewitz, and he is, of course, the chair of the Public Service Committee in the House of Representatives now, and early endorsee of Charlotte Golar Ritchie, and
Back in
so
May.
that's got to be somewhat disappointing to see those results.
Certainly it was. I mean, it was a long day, and I'm glad to be finishing up with you here today. So thank you for having me on. But yeah, I think we had high hopes going into the day, and as the turnout numbers were coming in, I think we were feeling good about our prospects, and numbers shook out, and they didn't shake out our way. I want to personally congratulate Marty Walsh and John Conley. I think they ran tremendous campaigns over the last, over the summer and into the early fall, and they should, and I think they ran the best 2 campaigns in the election, and I think it showed on election day.
Well, I think, and I mentioned this at the top of this segment. No one knew, and the few polls that had been done showed it so close, and the margin of error encompassed almost 8-9 candidates that could have theoretically been in this. So there wasn't as much polling this year as there has been in years past, and perhaps that was part of it, the fact that the field had narrowed quite as much as it might normally have.
Well, it's funny that the original poll, or one of the first polls that came out was the Suffolk University Boston Herald poll that came out back in early July, and it had John Conley and Marty Walsh 1 and 2. And here we are today on election day, and it's still John Conley, but now Marty Walsh may be number 1. But both of those 2 candidates were the ones that ended up finishing 1 and 2. So even
though your candidate in those early polls was, well, I won't say it was negligible, but it was very small, and perhaps she showed the most growth, but looking at the numbers, and if you look at race, ethnicity, neighborhoods, there's nothing definitive yet. Many people thought this was the year that a candidate of color would be successful, certainly make the runoff. What happened there? Is it?
I think she did end up catching fire towards the end, which moved her from single digits in kind of in the second tier up to the first tier, and eventually in 3rd place. And she was in 3rd place, or basically second or third, depending on which poll you looked at, over the last week. I think maybe, in somewhat respects, she ran out of time or didn't catch fire early enough and wasn't able to move the needle quicker enough to get her into the, near the top spot as we got to election day. But I think, I haven't really delved through the numbers yet, so it's hard to say exactly where she did well, where she didn't do well.
In your own neighborhood,
Yeah.
And I think that. Not to pick on the North End per se, or downtown per se, but those neighborhoods where there wasn't a candidate that hailed from there, it wasn't part of their thing. How did you see it kind of breaking down? Could you see this pattern emerging?
Yeah, I mean, throughout the summer, you had 2, with John Conley and Marty Walsh, you had both. People in my neighborhood worked very hard, and I want to congratulate them as well for their hard work.
Did they say, Aaron, what are you doing?
Well, no, I think I shocked a couple people by supporting Charlotte at first, but I think once people met her and saw her, I think we ended up finishing about 3rd, I think, in the North End alone. So I think people, once they met her and saw her, I think she did resonate across neighborhood lines. It didn't matter, whether you were in a community of color or in a majority white neighborhood like myself. She did resonate with people, but it just, like I said, it just wasn't enough, and you tip your hat to the 2 that made it.
Well, look ahead for us. Help us to envision how this race unfolds. When you first ran, you were in a very spirited race. Vote very split. A lot of candidates. Now we're down to 2. How do you see this race kind of breaking down on issues? Do you see any patterns, at least initially looking at it?
I think that you will look to the fact that the 2 candidates have pretty differing views on union issues. I would say, Marty is a very pro-union advocate, has always been, in the legislature and in
no apologies.
No apologies for it.
Former head of the building trades.
Former head of the building trades, and has done a very good job advocating for those issues. And then you have John, who has advocated for different things, especially with his education policy, in terms of potentially looking to change up the game with the group Stand for Children was very supportive of him. While they didn't end up giving him dollars, they ended up supporting him, and he went for that that endorsement, and that endorsement, really was a factor of how he wanted to change the education policy of the city. Now that could end up, that kind of discussion could end up butting heads with the teachers union. Obviously, the teachers union did not endorse John in the primary. They also didn't endorse Marty because Marty has been, pro charter school over the years. But you can see where this is somewhat heading, and I think that's the most stark contrast between the two finalists.
How about Mayor Menino's organization? He's kind of stayed on the sidelines, I think kind of, biting his tongue at times, if I could say so. Perhaps the best organization in the city. Does he get into this?
Your guess is as good as mine. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what the mayor is going to do. I think we'll all be watching. I think that he has, decided, at least for the primary, that it was best to, let it play out, let it shake out, see where it went. I think he's actually went on the record, from what I heard today, that he would not endorse in the final either. But
some would say these are his two least favored candidates in the race. I'm not sure if that's true, but
the mayor has proven always to be very politically savvy, and I'm sure he will make a very savvy decision when it comes to this decision, or maybe non-decision in this case.
Wow. And again, joining me in the studio here, Representative Aaron Michlewitz from the north end of Boston. Now the chair of the House Committee on Public Service. Is that a joint committee?
Yes.
A joint committee on public service. And now we do have some final numbers in the mayor's race, and want to bring them to you at this time. This is with 100% of the precincts reporting, and the early results have held true. Marty Walsh appears to be the winner with over 20,000 votes, 18.5%. John Connolly very close behind, point and a fraction behind him. The at-large city councilor, 19,420, that's 17%. Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, a very valiant effort coming from far down in the pack to finish third. Unfortunately, only the top two move on to the final. And Suffolk DA, Dan Connolly, who some people picked as the early favorite, certainly based on his campaign funds, raised and had nearly $1 million in his campaign account, advertised extensively, coming in now with 11.3%. And if we could, want to ask our crew here to bring up the others as well. This is, we'll go now to the at-large race, but we're going to have the numbers for the other candidates in the mayor's race shortly. And this also is a final now with 100% reporting. Ayanna Presley, who topped the ticket 2 years ago, again in this race, certainly topping the ticket. Michael Flaherty making a comeback after his failure to get elected last 2 years ago. Stephen Murphy, council president, strong third. Michelle Wu, a newcomer, a bright young face, young talent, comfortably in fourth place, at least at this point. And then we jump to Marty Keogh, an attorney, former aide to Peggy Davis Mullen for many years, is now in fifth place. Jeff Ross, political activist, formerly worked with Diane Wilkerson, and the first openly gay candidate running at large. He's doing very well. He's in sixth place. Anissa Asabi-George is in seventh place, that would be, at 4.8%, and Jack Kelley, who's had a rather inspirational story coming out of Charlestown, battling an addiction, and now neighborhood services liaison in Charlestown. He appears to be the eighth candidate. Catherine O'Neill, a former colleague of ours here at BNN, coming up just short, it appears, to make the runoff, and then Althea Garrison. There were 19 candidates in that race, huge field, and as a result of the departure of course, Felix Arroyo, John Connolly, both at-large councilors, And Rob Consalvo and Mike Ross, district councilors, also gave up their seats to run for mayor. The Boston City Council will have a face change, certainly, at least 4 new faces and perhaps more on there. And I think we have some district results as well. Now we go to District 4, Charles Yancey, of course, the only person running for mayor and running for re-election to his district seat at the same time, comfortably in the lead in his District 4. That's Mattapan, parts of Dorchester, parts of Roslindale. He's got over 65%. Terrence Williams, who runs a youth mission, is in second place, and he appears to be the other candidate that will go on to the finals. And if we go to, let's see if we have District 1, and there's Sal LaMattina, the incumbent, a very comfortable lead, appears to be well on his way to re-election. Brian Gannon, an anti-casino activist, in second. He appears to be the other candidate in the runoff. And we're waiting for some numbers. There they are. District 8, Josh Zakum, the namesake of Lenny Zakum, the anti-discrimination activist, late, whom the bridge is named for, seems to be doing very well there, 45.3%. Michael Nichols, City Council Chief of Staff, looks to be the other candidate in that race. And we're also waiting for some numbers for District 5, and I don't know if we have those yet. We're still waiting on them, and we're also going to have the complete numbers from the mayoral race, the other candidates in that race as well. Again, joining me in studio from the State House, Representative Aaron Michlewitz, and we've got just a minute or two left, Aaron, and how will things change? You know, I think people at the State House in the Boston delegation has always been very strong and very united, and they work well with Mayor Menino. But we're now about to have, not just in the mayor's office, but the council, major changes. Will that change the way you do business with City Hall and your colleagues in the State House do business?
No, I don't think so. I think we will continue to work with the City Council, with the mayor, whoever that may be. I think it's a good part. It's been a good partnership under Mayor Menino. We've butted heads at certain times. When the time was right, or when something came up, like libraries, for instance, was an issue that we butted heads with the mayor on. But most of the time, we've had a pretty good working relationship, and I think that will continue, with the City Council and with whoever the mayor may be.
Well, I want to thank you for coming in and joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You cast your lot with the candidates. Yep. Sometimes you hit it, sometimes you don't.
I just want to say that I was, I couldn't be more prouder of the way Charlotte, ran this race. She kept it very upbeat, very positive. I got to know her even better as the campaign went on, and I just think very highly of her, and I'm very, I'm looking forward to seeing what she does in the future and working with her on different levels.
Well, and thank you. I'm sure she feels the same towards you. We'll go now over to my colleague, who has two new guests joining her to analyze the results from today's preliminary election. We send it now over to Seth McCoy. Seth?
Thanks, Joe. Joining me now, Celeste Myers from No Eastie Casino, and Chris Lovett, who, of course, if you're watching BNN, you have seen Chris on his show, Neighborhood Network News. So I want to welcome you both to the program. So, Celeste, let's start with you. What do you think about tonight's results? Were you shocked?
I was a little bit surprised. I didn't expect the turnout. Naturally, I think like a lot of other folks, anticipated that John Connolly would be taking the lead, and that second place would be really a tough tie between Dan and Marty. So surprised.
So what does this mean for you in your efforts?
Well,
and just briefly give people at home, you've been interviewed several times here, but just in case people are watching and they're not familiar.
Absolutely. So I'm co-chair of No Eastie Casino. We've been working really hard since 2011 as a ballot question committee. Pretty much been the underdog in the race with the casino issue in East Boston, and with the advent of the mayoral campaign in the broad field, Bill Walczak brought the conversation into the forefront. And recently, Dan Connolly became much more vocal on the issue. So we had some anticipation that either Dan or Bill would have kind of a higher showing.
Not to be the case, though, this time around.
Right.
So moving forward, when you're looking at what the final two is, Marty Walsh, John Connolly, what will be your strategy to try to convince them, if you will, to change their positions? Do you think that's even possible?
Well, I think many of the candidates have played a pretty high-level race so far, just having so much ground to cover. And hopefully, as the field narrows, they'll have a little bit more opportunity to take a deeper dive. Neither have given me the sense in personal conversations that they're strongly for casino in the city of Boston, and with not necessarily having any kind of movements on the casino front. It's really important, what path they'll take. So hopefully they'll continue the dialogue that Dan and Bill started.
Chris, obviously this is going to be an important issue, the casino issue. What other issues do you see are going to come into focus now? Clearly, with so many candidates leading up until today, a lot of the issues got sort of lost in the shuffle, if you will, not a lot of focus on them. So what do you see as being the focus now?
I think there still will be a lot of focus on education, and I think Connolly has been a lot more explicitly reformist around that, but Marty Walsh has some reform credentials as well. He helped found, or at least got very active in one of the charter schools in Dorchester, and I think there would be maybe more talk about what that strong union support for him will mean in the future. We have a number of city contracts that are coming up, and there are indications that the last settlement with the firefighters raises the bar for a good many unions. So I think there's going to be a lot more scrutiny of that coming down.
Absolutely. And obviously they're going to have to decide on a number of issues, one being that Commissioner Ed Davis announced that he's going to be leaving, so that's an important role to fill. Any thoughts on who you think the next mayor should, and obviously we're a little far away because we still have to get to November to see who the next mayor is, but any thoughts on how whoever comes into office, and clearly this is going to be a question that both Marty and John are going to be asked during the next 6 weeks. Any thoughts on what direction they should take, advice you would give them? Celeste, putting you on the spot.
Sure. With the casino being my forte, look, John Connolly came out very early on before Mayor Menino decided that he was not going to continue in this race. So I think that he's had a lot of opportunity, sitting from the sidelines on City Council since 2007, to have a sense of what he'd like to do differently. So chances are that he may have a short list of who he might select, where Marty, being a union guy, has probably spent a lot of time reconnecting with his union brothers and may have a short list of his own. So it would be really interesting. I think either one of them is going to take the opportunity to do things differently, and perhaps Ed assumed that, probably has an opportunity, and decided to make that decision for himself early on.
I want to take a minute right now. We have Tim McCarthy, who is calling in from Hyde Park. He, of course, was one of the 8 candidates out in District 5 for the seat that was previously held by Rob Consalvo. Tim, are you on the line?
I am, Seth. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? So you
I am very good, actually. Thank you very much for asking.
You're welcome. So you are going on to November. You came in first place, followed by, I believe, Jean-Claude Sanon is the second place finisher. So what are you going to do in the next 6 weeks to make sure that you are the final finisher in November?
Well, I tell you what, we started out in April, and what we did is we knocked every single door in the entire district, and that's what we plan on doing again in the next 6 weeks. The funny story was I've got 2 boys, 13 and 15, and they've been door knocking beasts with me. They've been unbelievable, giving up hot summer days to go knock with their dad. It's been a great experience, and a team, it's really a bonding experience with my boys. But we're driving to the Trinity School up in Hyde Park today, and my boys opened that poll. So they dressed the poll the night before, and they opened the poll in the morning. And my 15-year-old, he looked at me and said, "Hey, Dad, I have good vibes. I think we're going to win. We worked really hard." And I said, "Thanks, buddy. I think we're going to win too." And he said, "Yeah, but we have another 6 weeks of this on." I said, "Yeah, that's right. We have another 6 weeks of this." So that's exactly what we're going to do. we've really gotten out there, and you know, I think it's all about hitting the ground running, making sure you get up into people's doors and make sure they know that you feel that you're the best qualified candidate, and making sure that they understand that you are the best qualified candidate, and convincing them that you are, and that's what it's really all about. And, I've got a great vision of what I feel Hyde Park should be, and what I feel Rosendale should be, and the change that Mattapan needs to take. So
You're
we're
not
ready to go.
You're not a newcomer to campaigning. Certainly, you worked for Mayor Menino for a number of years. What did you find different this time when your name is on the ballot?
Well, I think the strangest part of the entire process really was standing up in front of a meeting and not representing Tom Menino. That was a strange feeling to say it's all about me, what I feel and what I'm ready to do, and that was fantastic. But you know, I think we both have a background in working in neighborhoods and in community building and collaborating. And I think that the biggest lesson that I've learned from the mayor is that what's outside your front door is the most important. And you know, the candidates will talk about schools, and they'll talk about policing, and they'll talk about transportation and all of the big issues that they want to talk about. But really, if they look out their front door and they're not happy with what they see, they're going to leave. And if you start having people leave, then that's going to be the detriment of the city. So basic city service is always the key to make sure that the people in Boston are happy with where they are.
Great. Well, Tim, I don't want to keep you on the phone because I know you have some celebrating to do. So thank you for calling in, and best of luck in the next few weeks.
All right, Seth. I appreciate it very much and look forward to chatting with you again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye. So, Chris, Tim mentioned something that's probably very important to all of the residents of the city, and that is the basic city service deliveries. When people have a pothole on their street, a street light out, moving forward between Marty Walsh and John Conley, who are the top two finishers in this mayor's race, do you have any indication, or would you even want to say who you think might be in that same vein as Tom Menino?
I think Connolly has made it sound as if he wants to take Menino to another level. I think you might remember his campaign pitch outside the Apple store.
Yep.
And I've heard this in the neighborhoods too, that they want city government to be even more accountable, approachable, inaccessible, intelligible even. And so I think he's got the right concept, but as far as delivering on that, I wouldn't assume at the outset that it would be any less than that with Marty Walsh. I need some more time to look it over, and I think that's what the voters want too. They want to hear these people and get a sense of how they'll do.
Do you think it's going to be hard for either candidate, to whoever finishes in November, to live up to the legend that Tom Menino created?
I think the hardest thing is just going to be dealing with not so much the legends of the past, but the facts of the future. Because yes, I know right now we have a building boom. There's new property tax revenue coming in. There's a new casino going up, maybe. So
not if
Celeste can do anything about it. But these are all things that I think both candidates are going to be really focused on. I think the voters are too. We're not going to get into this for nostalgia. We have challenges ahead of us, we have opportunities ahead of us, and I think that's what they're going to be looking at.
What about in 2017? Do you think we'll see another campaign like this, campaign season where we have 12 candidates for mayor, 19 for at-large city councilor?
I would be surprised, unless whoever gets elected either moves on or finds a new reason for living. But I see this periodically. We had this 20 years ago. Not quite as many candidates, but we had a change of command in City Hall. We had a change of command in '83, going back to '67. So you always have more competition, more people, and I think, in the midst of this, we think that whoever's going to be elected is going to face a vigorous challenge 4 years from now, and more often than not, they don't.
Right, absolutely. Celeste, do you think that the next mayor, should we look at implementing term limits? A lot of people have talked about Mayor Menino has been there for 20 years. He's done a great job, but is 20 years too long?
I'd be reluctant to say whether or not I think 20 years is too long, but to kind of take a step back to the question you just asked, Chris, I think that a a lot of folks were reluctant because the term was so long to stick their toe in the water, and I think John Connolly was very brave to do so. But that being said, I think this field of 12 may be narrowed in the next 4 years, but I think that there are many that have been energized. Your Dan Connollys, your Bill Walzacks, and several others, Gola Ritchie. And I think we will see them.
She finished a strong third.
Right. So I think we will see those folks come back. I think they're taking away some lessons learned. I think on the outset, most people don't expect to win their first race. Right. Certainly not the mayor of the city of Boston. Right. So I wouldn't be so quick to say that whoever takes the seat in January won't face competition in 4 years.
And I want to talk a little bit about the at-large race, because certainly that's probably going to be something that you're targeting as you're looking forward to trying to stop a casino from coming into East Boston. There are a lot of different candidates on the ballot moving forward, just going through the list. Councilor Presley, Michael Flaherty, Council President Murphy, Michelle Wu, Marty Keogh, Jeff Ross, Anissa Asabi-George, and Jack Kelley. So obviously, you're targeting candidates, making sure that they know what your position is.
Sure.
Out of those candidates that are in the top 8 now, are you comfortable with the fact that you might be able to at least connect with many of them to convince them to support your position to not have a casino in East Boston?
Well, I'm hoping to. Of those that you listed, several are current sitting city councilors, and Ayanna Presley is against a casino, but I'm not so convinced that she doesn't believe that it's a done deal. Michelle Wu, I know that she is averse to plans for a casino in the city of Boston. The rest, I don't have a firm hold of what their viewpoint is. I was at the hearing at City Hall on Friday where they were talking about the venue and the date. So I look forward to the opportunity to connect with these folks and to get a sense, because although it is popular belief that it is a done deal and that it is coming, and a lot of folks, even though they're against a casino in Boston, they may think that a casino in the region is imminent, so they'd rather opt for Boston. But to really kind of educate them that they do have the ability to impact this.
Well, so is Everett not a done deal?
It's certainly not a done deal. So they did win the referendum vote. However, the application still needs to be submitted to the State Gaming Commission, and it can be dismissed by the State Gaming Commission for a number of reasons. That's important for people to know, because a lot of people say if not East Boston, then Everett will get impacts and we won't get benefits.
And I think that's important to point out, because a lot of people do think it's a done deal, and the Gaming Commission has the final say.
In their own words, broad discretion. Broad discretion to interpret the bill and to execute on applications as they see fit. And nothing's a given. And at the highest level, the application, from my perspective and from many others, seems substandard. Everett, as it stands now. East Boston, also substandard, and folks need to realize that too, that at the end of the day, we're facing very, very major impacts and really no guarantees. Right. It's easy to get heady when they talk about millions and millions of dollars, but when you see how it really breaks down and filters down to the average resident and business owner, not 1 cent is guaranteed.
Well, I think a lot of the concern that some people have, and I'm not sure if this is your concern, but the fact that if there is a casino built in either Boston or in Everett, you're basically a $2 T-ride away from gambling away a paycheck.
Absolutely, and that drains the revenues from the main streets and from the city of Boston and from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Sheer proximity to the airport makes a proposition of a casino in Everett or East Boston probably the most costly one in the Commonwealth. And I'm, loath to say that no one should have a casino in Massachusetts, but I have yet to see a proposal. I have yet to think of an instance where it would be an added benefit. These folks know we're the largest tourist destination in the nation, 4th. We're ahead of Disney World. They're coming to take the money away. They're not really coming to bring us anything.
So if a casino happens in East Boston, will you move out of the city?
I wonder that often. We are fortunate to work side by side with some tried and true activists in East Boston, folks that have been battling the airport for 40 years. When I look at the next 40 years of my life, I don't really see it battling a casino. So that's an important question. I know many folks have told me that if multi-generational East Bostonians that say that they will move out of the area and they will go someplace else.
Chris, are you surprised that there have been some people who are talking about that issue that Celeste just brought up about battling the airport for 40 plus years, who maybe came out against the casino initially and now are in support of one?
I think for some people, and this is not everybody, but you know, the casino is in a way like Massport. You know, the airport's been a source of much grief for East Boston, but a lot of people got jobs. And I'm not saying that if something else had been there instead of an airport, it would have been worse. I'm just saying people see it as a tangible benefit, at least, and it's very easy to focus on the positive part of it. I think what Celeste says about the regional drain on the economy, and aside from moral hazards and the toll of gambling addiction, I think that has to be taken seriously. But it's also a lot more diffused than someone saying, oh, I can get a job there if I call some city councilor or a state rep.
Right, and that's certainly not the way it works much these days anyway in terms of getting those jobs. But I also think that you're right. I think that if a casino is placed in East Boston, what happens to all of the mom and pop restaurants that are in the neighborhood? Do those, you know, dry up because people are just going to the casino to gamble? And then clearly there are going to be restaurants in the casino. And how does that impact the residents of East Boston and also the whole city?
Sure. Well, as you described, a casino in East Boston will only be a $2 tea right away. And that's a drain on the main streets. And when you talk about those small mom and pop operations, a lot of these operations are run by folks that are already working 1 or 2 full-time jobs. They're taking out of their pockets on a weekly basis to keep the operations afloat. A minute diversion of revenues, a small percentage, leaves their operation and heads to the casino. That's going to be enough to kill them. And it won't be immediate. It won't be like your big department stores or grocery chains. They can do the 6-month projections and forecast where they're going to be taking a bad turn. These folks are going to die a slow, painful death, and what they'll leave behind is a boarded up, blighted storefront. And even the more resilient businesses will deal with the exponential drain in their supply chain. They'll have to pick up the tab for consumer goods and services, insurance, and taxes and the like. That doesn't go away. And what happens is all that money gets funneled into the casino, and people talk about it going out of state close by. Well, it's going to Vegas, and it's going to Montana, to Richard Field's bank account. It won't be staying close to home in the Commonwealth.
Right. Chris, do you think that we will get a citywide vote on the casino, or do you think it will maintain jurisdiction in East Boston?
Well, if this is just up to the city council, looking at the people who are on the council right now, or the candidates who seem to have a chance of winning, it looks as if it's still going to be a vote in favor of just having a decision made in East Boston. And you have to remember too, when you combine that with a benefits package that's offered to East Boston, that also skews the vote in a way. Because if you have a citywide vote and you've got a benefits package for just one neighborhood, then that also has effect on the vote.
Well, and I think also the residents of East Boston will look at that and say, oh, well, we're getting all this money to beautify our neighborhood, and that's a great thing. And certainly somebody the other day made the connection that, well, if Harvard's doing development in Alston or Brighton, the city doesn't vote on whether or not that can happen. But Chris, do you view this as that's sort of like an apples and oranges comparison?
I think only so far, because the city does have some kind of zoning control over Harvard. Not a whole lot, because Harvard has all this land. They have a lot of leverage. But I think you got to remember, there's also a point that people like the head of ABCD, John Drew, has. He says, look, there are a lot of people from all over the city and beyond who would go there and gamble, and they're disproportionately poor. And most of them are not getting any benefits from this casino, except from maybe a few token gestures along the way. So he has a point.
Yeah. Well, this is definitely an issue that is going to be on the forefront in the next 6 weeks with the mayor's race and the at-large city council race. Celeste, I want to thank you for being here. Chris, thank you. And we're going to throw it back to Joe Heisler, who's got a couple more guests joining him right now. Joe?
Thank you, Seth. And tonight, of course, what a night it's been as we've been reviewing the results from today's preliminary election. The numbers are all in. They are unofficial numbers. It'll take the city a couple of days to verify them, but they are what they are, so to speak, and as Bill Belichick might say, and let's review them very quickly, and then we'll do a final analysis and wrap up with a couple of very special guests. First off, to District 1, Sal Lamontina, the incumbent, easily sweeping to victory there and appears to be well on his way towards re-election. Brian Gannon, an anti-casino activist, in second. He will make the runoff, it appears. John Ribeiro third. And now we go to District 4. Charles Yancey very comfortably in the lead there on his way back to the Boston City Council. He was not successful in the mayor's race, the only candidate running for both. Terrence Williams, runs a mission for youth, is the other candidate that will make the runoff, and we'll see if that turns into a race in the final election. Now we go to District 5, and this was very tight, 8 candidates in all. Tim McCarthy, a public works employee who's done several different jobs at City Hall for Mayor Menino, coming out of Reedville with the lead, 24.3%. And Jean-Claude Senan, he a independent businessman in Hyde Park, drawing heavily and making an issue of who represents the district. He is, of course, Haitian, and that looks like it could be a very close race in the final. Next up, District 8, this is the seat that Mike Ross gave up to run for mayor. And Josh Zakem, the namesake of Lenny Zakem, very comfortable lead there. Michael Nichols, City Council Chief of Staff in second and on his way to the runoff. And here we go, at large, and these have not changed. Again, these are all with 100% reporting. Ayanna Presley, the incumbent at-large councilor, topping the ticket. Michael Flaherty making a bid for a comeback in second. Steve Murphy, the city council president, in third. Michelle Wu, a newcomer, Harvard Law School grad, who's running strong in fourth. And the rest of the field, that again, here, only the top 8 go on to the final. They are Marty Keel, Jeff Ross, Nisa, Isabi George, and Jack Kelley. Our former colleague Catherine O'Neill seems to have come up short in her bid to join the Boston City Council. And finally, again, here's the mayor's results. You've seen them. They have not changed all night, basically. Marty Walsh, State Representative Marty Walsh from Dorchester, topping the ticket, 18.5%. Second place, at-large City Councilor John Connolly, 17.2%. They will make the runoff, the final in November. Charlotte Golar-Ritchie coming up short in her bid to become, make some history, become the first African-American elected and first woman elected mayor. Suffolk DA Dan Conley, who had a very nice campaign fund, didn't seem to help him tonight, unfortunately, 11.3. Here's the rest of them. And Charles Clemens, owns co-founder of a radio station, 1.5%. Bill Walzak, former CEO of the Codman Square Health Center, 3.4%. Charles Yancey, 2.1%. The councilor ran for both seats. Robbie Consalvo, who people thought might have a shot to crack the top 2. 7.6%. He gave up his seat. Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, you saw that one, 13.8. Michael Ross ran strong, ran a very good campaign at 7.2%. And here's the rest. Of course, Marty Walsh at 18.5. John Connolly, 17.2. Felix Arroyo, who also gave up his at-large council seat, 8.8%. David James Wyatt, a fringe candidate, less than 1. John Connolly. John Barrows, who did very well, 8.1%, but not well enough, he said formally. Joining me now live in studio, analysts to look at what worked and what didn't work for the candidates, and I want to introduce him on my left. He is the executive editor of CommonWealth magazine, well-known Boston journalist Michael Jonas, and a familiar face, now a successful businessman as well, former Boston City Councilor John Tobin
Thanks,
just
Joe.
opened his new comedy club, Laugh Boston. Congratulations
Thanks,
on
Joe.
that.
I appreciate it.
Thanks both for coming in. All right, let's talk quickly what went right, what went wrong. There's many. Should we be surprised that John Connolly and Marty Walsh ended up on top?
I don't think so. I mean, I think you saw the two superior ground games at work today. Marty Walsh with about 1,500 people on the streets today. In the last week, it was not unusual to drive around to see on the streets of Boston men and women, clearly workers with construction boots on, out with clipboards, canvassing neighborhoods. And John Connolly, who got into this race before anybody else did, who's put together a pretty good network of support around the city, since being elected to the city council in 2007, and even going back to his unsuccessful bid in 2005. So this is not New York City. This is not an air war where you're bombarded with necessarily with commercials. This is very much still a small city, a walkable city, a city where you should be able to get to every single voter at their doors or in front of a supermarket.
Ground game. Michael, you've been following the race as well. No shockers there, but maybe we should talk more about who didn't do well. I mean, some thought that, not to focus solely on her, but that Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, she did come in third, but that she could put it all together, especially now that Boston is a majority of people of color. What happened or what went wrong there?
I think you're right. She had a lot of potential, as people said from the start. She struck fear, frankly, into all the other candidates when she got into this race. She brought a strong resume to the race, but what she didn't end up delivering was really an effective message during the campaign or a strong campaign operation that could really ever get off the ground. She got into the race a little bit late, and had a hard time finding her footing and coming up with a message. I think it was hard for her in particular to try to figure out whether she was going to try to project a change message in the race, which was something a lot of the candidates struggled with given the popularity that the outgoing mayor, Tom Menino, still enjoys in the city. She was particularly identified with the mayor having been
So a reluctance to criticize for fear of ruffling of the well, I don't know if an 800-pound gorilla has feathers, but
yeah, I don't think she was reluctant to. I mean, I don't think there were great differences between her and the mayor, but I felt like her message, again, which didn't have a lot in terms of policy specifics to it. She talked about uniting the city, bringing it together. It implied somehow that the city indirectly was fractured or needed to be united, but she never really went far with sort of suggesting that was the case either. So I think that there was just sort of a difficulty putting together a message, and frankly, there were a lot of other strong candidates in the field, and as got talked about quite a bit. There were several strong candidates from the minority community. I think that definitely hurt her in the end as well.
Well, John, not to pick on the Irish, but they've been battling it out, splitting the vote, this, that for.
Well, let's pick on them.
We haven't had the seat in 20 years. What are you talking about?
And some people said those days were gone. Yet here we end up with last name Walsh, last name Connolly.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of in spite of that, coming full circle. What's going on?
Someone made a good point to me.
Or is ethnic, even racial politics, not important anymore?
I don't think it is. I mean, but it's no secret that the two people going to the final are both current elected office holders who have run campaigns. I mean, John Connolly's in a dogfight every 2 years for Boston City Council. Marty Walsh, though he hasn't had really a contested race since he won the seat, I think in 1997, Michael, still has organized labor, and he's ahead of the building trades, a job he gave up to run for mayor. So he has that at his disposal. Someone made a good point to me. This is the race that we're going to have now is the race we did not get in 1983. This is when we didn't get Dave Finnegan versus Ray Flynn in the final. Instead, Mel King got into that final. So that's the race that should have been 30 years ago. Well, was predicted to be by many, is the race we're going to get this time.
But and I want to go back to the topic. Did the you talked about the candidates, and again, maybe it's unfair to look at it by race, ethnicity, that type of thing. Yet there was some thought that since there had never been an African American or a person of color elected mayor, that this was the year that somehow they would galvanize. There was a rather, and I think some people would say, ham-handed effort to kind of, either push some people out of the race or unify around a candidate, but that seemed to backfire, and the Globe in particular seemed to take offense. And
the reason I think it backfired, Joe, because I think the city really is at a different place than it was 20 or 30 years ago, where a message like that to unify might have had more currency and gotten more support. I think people took offense at the idea that voters should coalesce strictly on that basis, and I think people looked at some of the other candidates. They saw John Barros, who was coming on strong, a very
and did very well.
Impressive candidate, gained quite
well.
a bit. I think he ended up finishing ahead of Consalvo by a small margin in there. So I think that there's going to be a lot of talk about the fact that in 2013
and finger pointing and backbiting,
and that in 2013, Boston, a city with such a tortured history around race, now sort of as we're pointing toward the future, we have two white guys in the final, and I think that hand can be overplayed. I think we could very well have had a minority candidate in the final. We could very well have had a strong candidate emerge who won the mayor's seat. I really think it's less a function of sort of the city being dug in around those issues than just the field of candidates that emerged. I just don't think we had a candidate that was strong enough this time around. There are other candidates that I think of, not to single her out, although I'll do it in a way that I think is flattering. But I was just earlier tonight at John Barros's party where I ran into Marie St. Fleur, who former state rep, also from Dorchester, who was supporting John this time around. I always thought that she would be an incredibly powerful citywide candidate. Mm-hmm. She's someone who has a magnetism and an ability to really inspire passion.
Self-assuredness.
She also, I think, is somebody who, like John, and also like John Conley, like a number of the other candidates, I think could have really been pushing a reform message around school issues that seems to have resonated. I mean, it's another point we haven't talked about, that the candidates finishing, in this case in the top three, all happen to be the three white Irish guys. They get described in those terms, but they were also the three candidates who were sort of embracing one of the more aggressive stances on school reform, as was John Barros, who frankly moved up a lot toward the end.
Put that in the context now of the final. How does this split? And first of all, I asked Representative Aaron Michlewitz this, and he didn't want to bite on this, but where does Mayor Menino go in this race? Some people have said, let's see, these are his two least favored candidates in the field, and maybe that's wrong, maybe that's unfair, but does he still stay on the sidelines now?
That's hard to say. I mean, only the mayor knows that. I mean, from what I've seen, a lot of people in City Hall have doing their jobs and seeing the administration out. Mm-hmm. There have been a few people who, because of neighborhood alliances, have gone on, either with John or with Marty. But this race is, this final is not about the mayor anymore. It's about, this boils down to, this has been 12 people who have been traveling the city kind of like in one van, going around to floor after floor to debate, and you give 30, 45-second clipped answers to very substantive questions, and it's hard to, now the spotlight is squarely on these two individuals who come from different parts of the city, have really different life backgrounds, and it's really, the focus is going to really be John's plank on education and jobs, and Marty's on labor and jobs
and education,
and folks in substance abuse and recovery. Yeah. It's a very, very interesting race, and I just want to go back to something. I think this race was less about race than it was about timing. Let's not forget, the mayor announced fairly late in March that he was not running, caught a lot of people by surprise, a lot of people. And I certainly don't think John Conley was privy to any inside information. So people just weren't ready.
Right, and
then
that way,
let's
John,
not-
it almost has a dynamic of like a special election. We keep saying special
course.
elections favor incumbents, people who are
Yes.
who are ready to roll from day one.
And this, and shortly after.
But wait a minute, didn't have Dan Connolly.
Well, let's not, okay. So you have the marathon tragedy that happens a few weeks later. So everybody's attention, rightly so, is diverted there. And then you get the Bruins going. You get the Whitey Bulger trial. You've got Aaron Hernandez, that story. And next thing you know, it's July 4th. And it's, as Michael and I were talking off here, Charlotte had her kickoff party sometime in July at Hibernian Hall. That's not, when Deval Patrick ran for governor, he was out. He had a year and a half in advance.
Right.
People couldn't pronounce his first name prior, but he had that year and a half to do that introduction. It's really tough to make an introduction to people when you've been out of office for a little while.
Right.
Or with going back to Dan, it's very tough, at least in this state, for AGs or people, law enforcement folks, to make that next level, because if you're doing your job, you're indicting people, you're arresting people, that's what you get known for. And it's not it's not a lot of glad handing.
Now we've got just a minute or two left. Where do the other the candidates that didn't make the runoff go? Do they jump on board here?
Those calls are being made right now. I would guarantee you that John Conley and Marty Walsh spent about 20 minutes at their campaign parties, and they are racing right now to Charlotte's, to Danny's, to Robbie, to Walzak. Pretty much from 3 to 11. In the candidates there, and going around trying to get their support and get their supporters.
Michael, you see a breakdown there, or any which way they go? You got the crystal ball? Well, not quite.
I mean, I'm not that clear on how the candidates themselves will go. I mean, I think it's in some ways almost more interesting to think about their bases of support. I mean, than the voters that they had backing them and how those are going to divide up. So I think, there's a few things that are of interest. Obviously, as we've been talking about, the two finalists being, white Irish males. So the minority vote in the city is really going to be a battleground in this race. I think another thing you have to recognize is that people kept talking about there was so much competition in the southwest part of the city for votes, with John Connolly, Dan Conley, Rob Consalvo all battling it out. Well, that area is now opening up.
Hyde Park.
It looks, like it ought to be fairly friendly territory for John Conley to make some gains, but Walsh will certainly be in there too. And then you've got what you might call sort of the in-town neighborhoods that did not figure, I think, that highly in today's race. It's always been the perennial question of whether you can get folks in those areas that don't turn out very high,
Will they
high
come for
numbers.
the final?
Will they? Can either of these candidates make some appeal there that gets those folks interested in the city's future?
Well, we shall see. Again, the results from today's preliminary election. We've got two finalists in the mayor's race. Of course, Marty Walsh, state representative from Dorchester, John Connolly, at-large councilor from West Roxbury. They made the final according to the unofficial results, and we look forward, like all of you, to the final election. Joining me in this final segment to talk about it, former Boston City Councilor John Tobin and CommonWealth Magazine executive editor Michael Jonas. Guys, I want to thank you both for joining us. We'll take one last look at the numbers before we go, and just a reminder that throughout the coming weeks, we'll continue to cover this race, these races, and we hope you'll join us here at BNN throughout the weeks that come. Here are the final numbers very quickly before we sign off. In District 1, the Councilor Sal LaMattina and Brian Gannon make the runoff. And in District 4, Charles Yancey is back, the councilor, and his opponent, Terrence Williams. In District 5, Tim McCarthy, coming out of Reedville, city employee against Jean-Claude Senan. And in District 8, Josh Zakem, namesake of Lenny Zakem, and Michael Nichols from the Boston City Council Chief Staff. And at large, the top 8 out of 19 are going on to the final. They are Ayanna Presley, Michael Flaherty, Councilor Steve Murphy, the City Council President, Michelle Wu, Marty Keel, Jeff Ross, Anissa Isabi George, and Jack Kelley. And as we mentioned before, the two winners tonight in the mayor's race, Marty Walsh and John Connolly. And I want to thank all of our viewers for joining us tonight, and I want to especially thank the staff here at BNN TV, the production crew. It's been a labor of love. They're great people, and they've done a great job tonight. On behalf of my colleague, Seth McCoy, I want to thank you for watching. I'm Joe Heisler, and we'll be back next week with our regular edition of Talk of the Neighborhoods, Monday at 8 p.m. Until then, have a pleasant evening. Good night.